Chapter 762. After thinking about this, I suppressed my astonishment and said to the twin Rakshasa, "I believe what you said, but I don't know how to enlighten you." Actually, I didn't need to agree to their request as they wouldn't attack me anyway. However, after the previous interaction, the twin Rakshasa wasn't as vicious as they appeared to be. Although they weren't fully intelligent, their hearts weren't bad. Furthermore, the Buddhists always said that saving a life was better than building a 7-floor pagoda. It was a simple task, so why not? I didn't think that my question would cause them to be stumped. Their face was filled with astonishment as they obviously didn't expect me to say that. They immediately raised their voice and asked me, "Does Grandmaster not know?" After hearing their words, I felt slightly awkward. I really didn't know how to enlighten them. I had never experienced such a thing before. Furthermore, I wasn't a Buddhist and didn't know any scriptures. How could I learn the method to enlighten them? I told the twin Rakshasa about the situation. After hearing it, their expression changed from astonishment to disappointment. Seeing this, I felt a little apologetic. The twin Rakshasa had waited in the Spirit Lock Tower for 1,000 years just for me to enlighten them. However, they didn't expect their hopes to be dashed just like that. After their joy, they were greatly disappointed. It was hard for them to accept it. The twin Rakshasa hugged their heads and squatted on the ground for a long time. Seeing them like that made me feel uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to comfort them. After about 3 to 5 minutes, they slowly raised their heads and looked at me. Their eyes were no longer as excited as before and had been replaced with emptiness. Their throat moved and after a long time, they squeezed out a sentence, "Is there really no other way?" I didn't reply to them and just stared at them for a long time. I really couldn't think of a way to help them, so I shook my head and sighed softly. Seeing me like that, the twin Rakshasa didn't appear to be depressed at all. Instead, they looked as though they had been relieved of a heavy burden. They slowly stood up and cupped their hands towards me. "Since that's the case, I won't disturb Grandmaster any longer. It seems that I'm destined to be unable to leave the Spirit Lock Tower." After saying that, he waved his hand and prepared to return to the base of the Black Lotus. For the twin Rakshasa to say something like that, they must have already lost all hope. Most people would not be able to maintain their rationality after such a great disappointment. He just felt a little sorry for it. With this thought in mind, an idea popped up in my mind. Once I was done with the matter at hand, I would go out and ask Reverend Miaojua if he had any solution. The golden door in front of me hadn't closed yet. Just as I was about to step through it, the twin Rakshasa's sorrowful roars echoed behind me. I thought that it couldn't bear the blow and wanted to vent its anger. However, when I turned around, I saw that it was lying on the ground. The black smoke around it was dispersing, as if it was about to vanish. My heart tightened, and I gave up on the idea of going to the 3rd floor. I hurried over and asked, "What happened?" The twin Rakshasa seemed to be in great pain. After a long time, they finally replied to me, indicating that they weren't sure either. They only felt as if their bodies were about to split open. Since they didn't give me a clear answer, I didn't know what to do. I asked, "How can I help you?" However, this time they didn't answer me. They rolled on the ground as if they were about to split open in the next second. While my heart was burning with anxiety, I suddenly felt my hands heat up. I lowered my head and saw that the mala beads in my hands were now as big as walnut. They were glowing with golden light. The mala beads spun in my hands a few times then flew toward the twin Rakshasa. I was a little shocked, and I didn't know what was going on. The mala beads hovered above the twin Rakshasa's heads and stopped. At this moment, the mala beads shone brightly, covering the twin Rakshasa's bodies. Instantly, the twin Rakshasas stopped screaming. It seemed they had fallen into a coma. Under the control of the mala beads, their bodies were no longer twisted. They turned around and sat down cross-legged, putting their palms together as if they were receiving the baptism of the Buddha's light. After seeing this scene, I was completely bewildered. I still didn't know what was going on. At the same time, the mala beads sprinkled a beam of Buddha's light in my direction. Before I could react, the Buddha's light entered my body. My body shook, and many Sanskrit words appeared in front of me. I had never studied Sanskrit before, but I could understand each and every golden word. It reminded me of the time when I received the reclining Buddha beads in Chio's tomb. Although I didn't know much about Buddhist scriptures, I could vaguely recognize the golden words in front of me. It was the most common scripture used by Buddhists to release souls from purgatory, the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's original vows scripture. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's original vows scripture was one of the 3 scriptures of Ksitigarbha. This scripture described Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's original vows, virtues, and vows. It emphasized Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's incredible vows. The scripture recorded that Shakyamuni Buddha was in the heavenly palace of Kaili, the second layer of the 6 heavens of the world of desire. He was speaking on behalf of his mother, Mahayana. He praised Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's great vows. Hell isn't empty, I swear not to become a Buddha, to save all sentient beings, to become Bodhi. He also introduced the typical examples of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's cultivation. Through the questions of Manjushri Bodhisattva, Mahayana Bodhisattva, the 4 heavenly kings, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Pugwang Bodhisattva, the Great Debate, the Emperor of Yama, the Evil Ghost King, the Master Ghost King, the Unbreakable Earth God, Guanyin Bodhisattva, and the Void Bodhisattva Bodhisattva's dialogue with Shakyamuni Buddha, the situation in hell was explained. In this scripture, Shakyamuni Buddha said that he had entrusted Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva with the task of educating and enlightening people in the Buddha-free world after his death. It seemed that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva wanted me to recite the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture that had suddenly appeared in my head. I suddenly remembered that the twin Rakshasa had asked me to enlighten them. Could it be that reciting the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture was the process of enlightening them? In just a few minutes, all these unimaginable things had happened. That seemed to be the reason. After thinking about this, I calmed my body and mind. I sat down cross-legged and cleared my mind of distracting thoughts. Then, I recited the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture, according to the golden words in front of me. This is what I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was in the Kaili heaven, preaching for his mother. At that time, all the Buddhas in the infinite world, including the great Bodhisattva Mahasattva, gathered together. According to legend, the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture could help the souls of the dead eliminate their negative karma, pay off their old debts, and repent for their evil deeds. It could also give the descendants of the dead the protection of Buddhism. Most importantly, it could prevent the reader from falling into the evil path and from dying. During this process, I could feel my entire body relaxing. I didn't know if it was just my imagination or if the Buddhist scripture was really effective. It took me more than half an hour to finish reading the golden words in front of me. I guessed that this was just a small part of the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture. If I wanted to read the entire scripture, I would need a lot of time. At this moment, the last syllable had come out of my mouth. The golden words in front of me scattered and flew toward the twin Rakshasa sitting cross-legged in the Buddha's light. Those golden words didn't enter their bodies. Instead, they hovered around them and wrapped them up. They didn't leave any gaps. After finishing this, I wasn't in a hurry to leave. First, I was interested in the twin Rakshasa's appearance after being enlightened. Second, I needed to get the Buddhist prayer beads before I could go upstairs. From some ancient books, I had learned that the baptism of the Buddha's light was the desire of many Buddhists. Although I wasn't a Buddhist, perhaps I could benefit a lot from the Buddha's light. More than half an hour had passed. I was a little tired, but the Buddha's light didn't change at all. While I was getting impatient, the golden words wrapped around the twin Rakshasa started to enter their bodies at a speed visible to the naked eye. After each character disappeared, the golden light on the twin Rakshasa's body became brighter. Gradually, I didn't dare to look at them with my naked eye. I didn't know how long it had been, but something suddenly appeared in my hand. I rubbed my eyes and took a closer look. It was the reclining Buddha beads. At this moment, the beads had returned to their original appearance. However, the golden light around them had vanished. Seeing this, I immediately turned to look at the twin Rakshasas' position. What I saw stunned me. Two people with Buddha's light were sitting on the twin Rakshasas' seat. The man was wearing a yellow monk's robe. His red hair was now bald, and his scary face had become more handsome. The woman next to him was the female Rakshasa of the twin Rakshasa. She didn't have her enchanting appearance anymore. Now, she looked so solemn that people didn't dare to have wild thoughts about her. I had already prepared myself, but when I saw their changes, I couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect that the twin Rakshasa would look like this after being enlightened by the Buddha. At this moment, the two of them looked at me. Their eyes were empty, and their faces were expressionless. When they saw that I hadn't reacted yet, they stood up and walked toward me. When they were 1 meter away from me, they put their palms together and chanted Buddha's name. Then, they bowed to me and said, "Thank you, Grandmaster, for your kindness. We can't repay you. From now on, we can only pray for you in the netherworld." His words pulled me back from my daze. I remembered that they had said that they would ascend to the Great Path after being enlightened. Why did they say that they wanted to return to the netherworld? I frowned and asked the question in my mind. After listening to me, the two of them bowed to me. When we were being enlightened, we received a message from Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. He asked us to return to the netherworld as soon as possible and stay by his side to comprehend Buddhism. He wanted us to help the Bodhisattva save the sufferings of the netherworld. Then, the two of them bowed to me again. Their bodies turned into black smoke and disappeared. It was obvious that they had returned to the netherworld. Chapter 763. After passing through the golden door, I arrived at the 3rd floor. Since I didn't know the situation, I didn't dare to rush in. I sat down and circulated the Tao energy in my body a few times before I calmed down. I slowly opened my eyes and heaved a sigh of relief. Then, I started to observe the surroundings. With my previous experience, I took out the prayer beads and placed them on my hand. Then, I stuck close to the wall and walked forward. I didn't dare to be careless. From time to time, I would glance at my surroundings. After walking for more than 10 minutes, the prayer beads didn't change. Since my nerves were always tense, I had consumed a lot of energy. At this time, I became even more nervous. It wasn't because I couldn't find the way to go upstairs, but because I felt a pair of eyes staring at me from behind. However, when I turned around, I didn't see anything. Of course, I didn't think that it was an illusion. After reaching the Seal Heavenly Master realm, my perception of the surroundings had already surpassed that of ordinary people. Unless someone stronger than me deliberately created an illusion, I wouldn't be wrong. Before entering the Spirit Lock Tower, I couldn't imagine that I, a Heavenly Master, would be defeated again and again. I didn't even have the power to fight back against the twin Rakshasa on the 2nd floor. One could well imagine just how terrifying the monster in the 3rd level was for it to be able to make me so nervous. However, what would come would come. It was useless for me to be afraid. It would be better for me to recover my energy. Otherwise, if I were to be caught unprepared, I would be defeated in one blow. Thinking about this, I threw the prayer beads back into the Xiang Lu pouch. Then, I sat down and closed my eyes to adjust my breathing. At the same time, I spread part of the Tao energy in my body around 5 meters around me. Although it consumed a lot of energy, the surroundings were filled with a strange aura. I couldn't afford to be careless. When the Tao energy in my body had circulated for the 9th cycle, the sound of Tao energy exploding echoed around me. The chaos, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly exploded. It made my body shake. I hurriedly opened my eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. I saw a broken arm flying toward me. I didn't expect it to be something like that. Although it was only a broken arm, with my previous experience, I didn't dare to underestimate it. Judging from how it easily broke through my Dao Qi barrier just now, its strength is already extraordinary. One must know that even a heavenly master seal would not be able to break through my Dao Qi barrier with a single strike. Seeing that the arm was getting closer and closer to me, I hurriedly stood up and took out the Xianyuan sword from my mouth. Unexpectedly, when the arm saw me raise the Xianyuan sword high, it stopped in place and didn't come forward. However, its actions aroused my vigilance. I knew that none of the monsters in the Spirit Lock Tower were easy to deal with. It's definitely not because it's afraid of the sword in my hand. As for the reason, I have no way of knowing it now. However, the fact that it didn't move gave me a chance. This was the best time to seize the initiative. While it was unprepared, I would deal a fatal blow to it. Perhaps I would be able to defeat it. After thinking about it, I placed the Xianyuan sword on my back and slowly leaned forward. The qi in my body was slowly transferred to the Xianyuan sword. When the arm saw me coming, it still didn't react. Seeing this, I felt that I had a better chance of winning. When I was only 2 meters away from him, I roared and swung the Xianyuan sword at the severed arm on the ground. Wherever the sword qi went, it stirred up a cloud of dust, completely blocking one's line of sight. When the sword qi landed on the ground, there was a deafening rumble that shook the entire building. The echo lingered in the building for a long time. When the dust settled and the echo died down, there was no trace of the arm in its original position. There was only a shallow hole on the ground left by the sword energy. Seeing this, I subconsciously thought that the arm had been cut to ashes by the Xianyuan sword. After all, that attack had used up all the Dao energy in my body. At this time, the exhaustion brought about by the exhaustion of Dao energy swept through my body. I couldn't stand and could only sit on the ground. I took a deep breath and calmed my aura. Then, I closed my eyes and began to absorb dragon energy from the jade bracelet to fill the gap. I didn't set up a barrier of Dao energy. I just wanted to recover faster. However, in just 2 cycles, a strange voice rang out beside his ear. Emperor Xianyuan? Hearing this sound, my heart tightened. Is there something else on this floor? Thinking about this, I opened my eyes and looked at the source of the sound. There was a skull on the ground 2 meters away from me. He hadn't sensed that this thing was here before. Could it be that the sound just now was coming from it? I looked around to make sure that there was nothing else. Then, I fixed my eyes on the skull. I didn't dare to reach out to touch it, so I had to use the Xianyuan sword to poke the skull. As soon as the sword touched it, I saw its mouth open and close, saying, "How dare you?" After hearing this, I frowned and took the Xianyuan sword back. Then, I asked, "Who are you?" The skull didn't answer. Instead, it talked to itself. "You're not Xianyuan Emperor. You're too weak. Why is the Xianyuan sword in your hand? Why do you have his aura?" His words were true. Compared to great Emperor Xianyuan, my strength was indeed far too lacking. However, since this thing recognized the Xianyuan sword, it wasn't an ordinary person. Then, I repeated my question. This time, it answered me neatly. "I'm the king of the Shang dynasty, Wang Hai." Then, there was a burst of sound in the air. It should be the sound of something breaking through the air. It was said that once one's speed exceeded the speed of sound, it would cause an air explosion and produce a thunderous sound. In the blink of an eye, 2 broken arms, 2 leg bones, and a chest cavity flew in from all directions. Together with the skull, they formed a complete skeleton. Seeing this, I suddenly thought of Prince Ye's corpse in the classic of Mountains and Seas. Prince Ye's corpse had 2 hands, 2 thighs, chest, head, and teeth broken in different places. It was said that Prince Yi was Shang Wang Hai. Wang Hai was killed and his corpse was divided into 8 parts. Together, Wang Hai had 2 heads and 6 bodies. Wang Hai was the 6th grandson of King Bo Qi, the eldest son of Ming. He succeeded as the leader of the Shang clan and was one of the ancestors of the Shang clan. Wang Hai was from Shang Qiu during the Xia dynasty. In the 11th year of Xia Shaokong, Wang Hai's father, Ming, was sent to deal with the problem of the Yellow River. At that time, Wang Hai started to help his father. However, in the 13th year of Xia dynasty, his father died in the Yellow River. So, the Shang people would worship Ming during the winter solstice. Because of this, Wang Hai officially became the 7th leader of the Shang clan. According to the records, in the 12th year of Emperor Xie, Wang Hai and his younger brother, Wang Heng, set off from Shangqiu. They carried goods and drove cattle and sheep to Yue in Hebei. Mianchen, the leader of the Yue tribe, had evil intentions. He killed Wang Hai, drove away Wang Hai's entourage, and took the goods and sheep. Since then, Wang Hai was dismembered and turned into the corpse of the ancient great monster king, Zai. According to the records, Wang Hai was the 6th grandson of Shang-Chi. Talking about the Shang-Chi, I suddenly thought of the silver-eyed man in the fire god temple. I remembered that he had told me that he was Shang-Chi. He called me Imperial Father, and at that time, I knew my identity as Emperor Ku. So, the skeleton in front of me was Emperor Ku's 7th grandson. Suddenly thinking of this, I found it hard to express my emotions. I didn't know if I should be happy or worried. Seeing that I didn't respond, Wang Hai asked loudly, "Who are you? What are you doing here? Also, why do you have the aura of my ancestor, Emperor Xianyuan?" I smacked my lips. I didn't know how to answer him. I was Emperor Ku, so of course I had the aura of my ancestor, Emperor Xianyuan. Otherwise, how could I make the Xianyuan sword recognize me as its master? However, if I told him the truth, he definitely wouldn't believe me. But if I didn't tell him, he would probably attack me. He would bear the crime of deceiving his master and ancestor. After the incident with the twin Rakshasa on the 2nd floor, I realized that everything that appeared in the Spirit Lock Tower had a reason. The appearance of Emperor Ku's 7th grandson on the 3rd floor probably meant that he wanted this matter to have a connection. Moreover, there was nothing more important in this world than a bloodline connection. After thinking about it, I decided to tell him the details. After hearing my words, he was stunned on the spot. His body didn't move at all. However, in just a moment the skeleton around him started to creak. Then, he shouted, "How dare you? You dare to offend my ancestor! Watch as I pull out your tendons and pull out your bones, then throw you into the 9 hells to suffer the pain of purgatory." After saying that, his aura surged. I saw him spit out dark green smoke from his mouth, heading straight for me. I had never seen this smoke before, but it definitely wouldn't feel good after coming in contact with it. I immediately retreated and used the Tao energy in the veins of the heavens to build a barrier 3 meters around me to block the green smoke. Unexpectedly, when the smoke hit the barrier, it wasn't blocked at all. Instead, it passed through. This scene left me speechless. Seeing that the barrier was useless, I didn't dare to waste any more energy. I waved my hand and retracted the barrier. At the same time, I raised the Xianyuan sword to block the smoke. However, the Xianyuan sword didn't have any effect on the smoke. Instead, it sped up its speed. Seeing that, I quickly ran away. As I ran, I thought about how to prove what I had said so that he would stop. I had seen Wang Hai's speed just now. Before I could run far, he had already caught up with me, and his hand was already clutching my neck. From his empty eyes, I could feel the aura of death. Moreover, he gradually increased the strength of his hand, which proved that it wasn't an illusion. At this moment, my face was red. I didn't have any strength left in my body. I could only exhale through my nose and mouth. Chapter 764. When Wang Hai heard that, his hand paused for a moment. He moved his head closer but didn't move again. Seeing that, I had time to explain. I immediately shouted, "I have a way to prove that what I said was true." I could clearly feel his hand tremble. But in the blink of an eye, he tightened his grip. His empty eyes seemed to be burning with fire, and the aura of death became thicker. At this moment, I didn't have any Tao energy in my body, but I still had plenty of shaman energy. However, I knew that if I used my shaman energy now, it would be great if I could break free. Otherwise, Wang Hai would kill me on the spot. He wouldn't give me a chance to explain. I didn't have time to think. At this critical moment, it was more important to stay alive. Then, I bit the tip of my tongue to wake myself up. Then, I mobilized the shaman energy in my heavenly veins and placed it on my hand. I clenched my weak fists. While Wang Hai wasn't paying attention, I aimed both of my fists at his face. Wang Hai didn't expect that I would still have the strength to struggle. He was stunned for a moment, but he quickly dodged my attack. Of course, I didn't think that I could defeat him with just one punch. I just wanted to divert his attention. At this moment, Wang Hai's hand that was strangling my neck loosened a little. I seized the chance to get rid of him and jumped 5 meters away. I thought that Wang Hai would chase after me when he saw that I had escaped. Unexpectedly, he stood still and didn't move. He didn't have any flesh or blood on his body. I couldn't tell why he was standing in the distance. While I was muttering to myself, Wang Hai retracted his aura and asked coldly, "You have the power of the monster race. Who are you?" He recognized the shaman energy in my body. But I didn't expect that he wouldn't attack me even though he knew that I had shaman energy in my body. Anyway, he must have his concerns. Of course, I wouldn't tell him my other identity. I just repeated what I had said earlier. Wang Hai didn't believe me. I couldn't blame him. If it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have believed that Tao energy and shaman energy could coexist. However, that was the only explanation I could come up with. As for the shaman qi in my body, I could only attribute it to the uniqueness of my bloodline. After Wang Hai listened to my explanation, he became silent and didn't pursue the matter. After a short while, he muttered to himself, "That year, the ancestor Emperor Ku perished together with the monster god Jun. It was said that their corpses merged together. Could it be that the powers of the human race and the monster race can coexist?" Hearing his words, I heaved a sigh of relief in my heart. Since he had already realized this, he probably wouldn't recklessly make a move against me. Thus, I paused and told him what I knew. After the war that year, Emperor Ku and monster god Ling fell at the same time. Apart from their corpses, their souls were intertwined and never separated for thousands of years. I am the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and monster god Ling. So, I am both Emperor Ku and monster god Ling, in actual fact. From the note that Nangong had written when he handed me the Xianyuan sword, I had a vague understanding of my origins. Combined with the half-human, half-beast statue that I had seen in the Yinshang king's tomb, as well as the words of worshipping evil spirits, I had a complete understanding of everything. I was indeed the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and monster god Ling. Back then, monster god Ling and Emperor Ku perished together. After their corpses merged together, the human race used the blood sacrifice technique to transform all the Tai Sui that they could find into the veins of the true dragon. It wasn't until King Wen performed the Book of Changes and used the power of the Book of Changes to send the entangled souls of monster god Ling and Emperor Ku into the cycle of reincarnation that the matter finally came to an end. And for my parents to name me Zhou Yi, it was really already predestined. After understanding everything, I tried to ask the silver-eyed man in the fire god temple who addressed me as father. However, I couldn't spare any time. Now that I met Wang Hai, who was also a descendant of Emperor Ku, I hesitated for a while before telling him everything. I wanted to see if he knew anything. After Wang Hai heard what I said, his body shook. His empty eyes were filled with shock. I didn't need to ask to know that he didn't know anything at all. After saying all this, I felt perturbed. I didn't know what his attitude would be in such a situation. However, looking at his current state, at least he didn't immediately attack me like he did earlier. That was a good sign. In terms of power, I wasn't Wang Hai's match at all. Now that I didn't have any external power to rely on, My only way out was to make Wang Hai accept my identity. After staying silent for a long time, Wang Hai looked conflicted. He asked me again, "How do I know that you aren't lying to me on purpose?" His gaze was conflicted. It was most likely that he believed my words, but he still asked. It was most likely that he couldn't accept it. I smiled bitterly. You also know that Taoism and witchcraft can't coexist. Apart from this situation, who else can cultivate both Taoism and witchcraft qi at the same time? Wang Hai shook his head in disbelief. There are countless strange and unpredictable people in the world. Cultivating both Taoism and witchcraft qi at the same time doesn't mean anything. It was somewhat unreasonable of him to say that, but at this moment, I was the fish on the chopping block. After thinking for a while, I said, "If you don't believe me, I have another way to prove my identity." I suddenly remembered that when I was at home, I had set up a formation in his ancestral grave in order to punish old scoundrel Zhou. It was called the Ancestral Seeking Formation, and it could identify bloodlines. I told Wang Hai about the effect of the formation. After listening to it, he was silent for a while and nodded. "Then, we'll use this method to verify our relationship." After saying that, he took a step back and didn't say anything else. Before setting up the formation, I told Wang Hai that I needed time to recover the Taoism in my body. Firstly, I didn't dare to determine if the formation would be effective in the Spirit Lock Tower. If the formation failed, Wang Hai might attack me. At that time, I would have the ability to resist him. Secondly, I also needed to use Taoism to draw talismans. Although the witchcraft qi in my body could also draw talismans, the cost of using witchcraft qi to draw talismans was too high. After about an hour, the Taoism in my body was finally full. Only then did I take out the weasel hair brush and talisman paper and seriously draw talismans on the ground. With my current realm, drawing this kind of low-level talisman was a piece of cake. However, what I had to do next made me hesitate. Back when I set up the formation in the ancestral grave, I used two types of yin and yang wood, the peach wood and locust wood. Only through these two types of wood could I draw the ancestral qi. But now, in this spirit lock tower, there wasn't even a stone, let alone a wooden branch. After thinking for a while, I had an idea. The ancestral seeking formation was a formation recorded in the first chapter of the Death Scripture. Back then, with my glory of knowledge cultivation, I could only copy it. But after reaching the heavenly master realm, I could see the essence through the phenomenon. The reason why I used the peach wood and locust wood was to borrow the yin and yang qi to communicate with the formation. Without these two things, I could directly manipulate the yin and yang qi to achieve the same effect. With this thought, I mobilized the Taoism in my body and separated the yin and yang qi to send into the ancestral seeking formation. The essence of Taoism was yang qi. Logically speaking, I should summon Tong Tong and control the yang qi myself. It would be most appropriate for Tong Tong to bring out pure yin qi to cooperate with me. However, Wang Hai hadn't made his stance clear yet. Naturally, I couldn't let Tong Tong come out and take the risk with me. After sending in the yin and yang qi, the ancestral seeking formation was finally formed. However, there was still one last step to distinguish the bloodline. That was to send Wang Hai's and my blood into the formation. I circulated my Taoism and forced a drop of blood from my fingertip to send into the formation. Then, I turned and told Wang Hai what I needed. Wang Hai was a skeleton, and there wasn't a drop of blood in his body. However, blood came from the marrow, so it was the same to use his skeleton. After hearing my words, Wang Hai didn't hesitate and directly threw an arm bone into the formation. Then, he asked me, "How about this?" I nodded and didn't say anything. Together with Wang Hai, I stared at the ancestral seeking formation. At this time, a large amount of yellow smoke was rising from the formation. The drop of blood that I had dripped earlier had already adhered to Wang Hai's arm bone. The yellow smoke was coming from the place where the blood was adhering to the bone. Besides the smoke, the drop of blood was eroding the arm bone at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, its volume had shrunk by half. However, the arm bone didn't have any trace left. It was still bright and clean, just a little more lustrous than the other parts. At the same time, I suddenly felt a warm feeling in my heart. When I turned to look at Wang Hai, I felt an inexplicable sense of intimacy. It was as if I had known him for a long time. I didn't know if Wang Hai felt this way or not, but he had seen the blood dissolving into the bone with his own eyes. I didn't need to explain it to him. He should be able to understand the result. Just as I heaved a sigh of relief, Wang Hai suddenly punched the ground. He suppressed his voice and roared, "How could this be?" Obviously, he couldn't accept this situation. This punch was filled with hatred, and all the strength in his body burst out. In a flash, it was as if there was an earthquake. Dust flew everywhere, and the ground trembled. The ancestor-seeking array in front of me collapsed in an instant. Even I couldn't control my body and flew backward. Even if I used all the Tao Qi in my body to protect myself, it was of no use. I knew that Wang Hai was strong, but I didn't expect him to be so terrifying. Now, it seemed that he didn't directly kill me. Otherwise, I was afraid that I wouldn't even have the chance to explain. Fortunately, when I was arranging the ancestor-seeking array, Wang Hai had retreated some distance. After I flew backward for a few meters, I barely withstood the impact of the fist wind and wasn't seriously injured. However, I didn't know why, but at this time, Wang Hai let out a muffled groan, and there was a cracking sound coming from his chest. I turned to look and saw that two of his sternum were inexplicably broken. With Wang Hai's cultivation, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his bones were as hard as iron. There was no movement at all. How could his sternum be broken for no reason? I didn't understand. Wang Hai's expression also changed dramatically. He looked around and didn't know what had happened. At this time, an idea flashed in my mind. I turned to look at the broken ancestor-seeking array on the ground. I recalled old rogue Zhou's embarrassment when I arranged the array. Chapter 765. Very quickly, Wang Hai seemed to understand this point. However, he was obviously unwilling to give up. He clenched his fist and punched the ground again. This time, I was in trouble. I hurriedly used my Tao Qi, but I couldn't resist the impact of the punch. I retreated a few meters again. Although the ancestral seeking formation had dissipated, the power of the bloodline lingered for a while. Just like before, Wang Can's ribs were inexplicably broken again. He didn't seem to believe it and tried a few more times. As I moved further away from him, the damage I received decreased. However, he was continuously injured. In the end, he fell to the ground, his body trembling rapidly. When he finally stopped, there weren't many bones in his chest that were still intact. However, he didn't care. He stared at me and asked in a weak voice, "What happened? You? Tell me in detail." I could clearly feel his trembling as he spoke. Perhaps he still couldn't accept this fact. However, I understood. Perhaps, in his heart, his ancestor, Emperor Ku, was one of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, a hero of the human race. Even if he was reincarnated, he would be a famous almighty being. I didn't expect that after Emperor Ku was reincarnated, he would be as weak as me. If it were me, I would also be very disappointed. However, this was an irreversible fact. He had to accept it even if he didn't want to. I sighed, then told him the function of the ancestor-seeking formation. Wang Hai already had an answer in his heart. After listening to me, he remained silent and didn't move for a long time. I didn't say anything and just stood at the side, waiting for him to think it through. After an unknown period of time, Wang Hai finally stood up shakily. Then, he picked up the broken bones on the ground and put them back on his body. Then, he walked towards me. When he stood in front of me, he wasn't as violent as before. Instead, he knelt down and said with a trembling voice, "Seventh generation Sun Hai greets the ancestor. I didn't know the ancestor's identity before, so Hai Wan died." Then, he kowtowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. After hearing that, I felt an inexplicable warmth in my heart. I wanted to extend my hand to pat his shoulder, but I felt that it wasn't appropriate. I could only use both hands to help him up. I said warmly, "I know how you're feeling right now, but I can understand. It's just that this bloodline connection has never changed, it's really hard on you." Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, Wang Hai immediately knelt down and said, "Hai doesn't dare." Seeing this, I was startled and only reacted after a while. In his generation, blood relations were the most important thing in life. What I said before was indeed a bit inappropriate. I gestured for him to get up. I looked at Wang Hai's skeleton in front of me, and my heart was filled with sorrow. Judging from his figure, he must have been a mighty and extraordinary person when he was alive. How could he have fallen to such a state? I wasn't in a hurry to go to the 4th floor. I pulled Wang Hai aside and chatted with him. As for Wang Hai, there are records in the ancient books that he is an ancient demon. As for why he would appear in the Spirit Lock Tower, I have no idea. Thinking till here, I voiced out the doubt in my heart. Wang Hai was silent for a moment before telling me the reason behind it. In the 12th year of the Emperor of the Great Xia dynasty, Wang Hai was ordered to set off from Shangqiu with his younger brother, Wang Heng. They carried goods and drove cattle and sheep to the Yi clan in Hebei. Originally, they planned to trade with the Yi clan, but unexpectedly, they were killed by the chief of the Yi clan, Mian Chun. I had seen this in some information. It was said that Mian Chun killed Wang Hai because he was tempted by wealth. Unexpectedly, Wang Hai was a little hesitant when he said this. He said that the reason wasn't like that, but that he was caught and killed because he was discovered secretly with Mian Chen's wife. Hearing this, I was stunned. I didn't expect there to be such a secret. I was curious, but I was his 7th ancestor in name, so it wasn't appropriate for me to ask about it. I didn't mention it, but Wang Hai took the initiative to tell me the details. The reason why he appeared in the Spirit Lock Tower was also because of this. Mian Chen's wife was called Wening. She was originally from the Shang nation and lived at the border of the Shang nation. In the early years, Wang Hai followed his father, Wang Ming, to the border of the Shang nation to deal with the natural disasters. They passed by Wenying's tribe. The tribe suffered a serious natural disaster, so Wang Hai was ordered to stay and deal with it. I didn't expect that in the process, I would develop feelings for Wening. However, at that time, the laws of the country were already strict. They didn't allow private marriages. As a prince, Wang Hai's marriage had to be even more strict. Wang Hai could only wait for his father to return before reporting this matter to him. Unexpectedly, he received an order from the Xia dynasty's emperor to ask Wang Hai to follow his father, Wang Ming, to deal with the problem of the Yellow River. This time, it was already the 13th year of the Xia dynasty. Wang Hai still decided to go back to find Wening. Regardless of whether she was already married or not, he had to see her. At this time, it was already the 13th year of the Xia dynasty. Wang Hai still decided to go back and find Wening. Whether or not she was already married, he still had to see her. Unexpectedly, when Wang Hai returned to find Wening, he was told that she had been kidnapped by the Yi clan. Wang Hai knew that the Yi clan was arrogant. They had offended the Shang nation's borders for many years, but he couldn't do anything to them. However, Wang Hai still couldn't let go of Wening, so he thought of a way. He led a caravan to the Yi clan and used the name of trade to find Wenying's whereabouts. He didn't expect that when he found Wening, she was already the wife of the Yi clan's leader. Seeing this, Wang Hai's heart was already dead. He didn't expect that Wening would marry his enemy. However, when Wang Hai heard that Wening had been bullied by Mian Chun for many years and lived a miserable life, he felt indignant. Originally, during the period of slavery, women were considered the property of men. They were only used as tools to give birth to children. They had no social status at all. If it was an ordinary woman, it would be fine. However, Wen was Wang Hai's most beloved person. It was difficult for Wang Hai to calm down after she suffered such humiliation. Then, he wanted to secretly leave the Yue clan with Wen. Unexpectedly, someone told him, and Mian Chun learned of the news in advance. While Wang Hai was drunk, Mian Chun killed him. Not only that, Mian Chun also cut up Wang Hai's corpse and scattered it in the wilderness. Wen didn't have a good ending either. After she was killed by Mian Chun, her soul was sent into the 9 hells to suffer the pain of purgatory. Originally, they thought that the two of them weren't fated to be married in their lives. After they died, they could at least be a ghost couple. However, they didn't think that after Wang Hai died, his resentment was too great. His soul didn't return to the 9 hells. Instead, he turned into a big monster with his remains. Of course, the big monster he turned into was not a monster. He just floated alone in the human world. His cultivation was great, but no matter what he did, he couldn't enter the 9 hells and meet up with Wen. Time flew by, and after several thousand years, things suddenly took a turn for the better. Around the time of the Tang and Song dynasties, a powerful ghost in the 9 hells broke through the restriction between the human world and the 9 hells and escaped. It left behind a passage to the 9 hells. After getting the news, Wang Hai immediately rushed to the location of the restriction. Unexpectedly, a monk had already built a pagoda there. This was a rare opportunity. Wang Hai definitely wouldn't give it up like this. Then, he fought with the monk. He planned to push down the pagoda and reopen the restriction. However, after cultivating for thousands of years, he wasn't a match for the monk. In the end, he didn't enter the 9 hells. Instead, he was imprisoned in the pagoda. Before the monk left, he told Wang Hai that the day he let go of his obsession would be the day his soul returned to the 9 hells. Then, Wang Hai didn't say anything else. I clearly detected a trace of desolation in his empty pupils. According to the historical records, although Wang Hai was very successful, he was a monarch who liked to indulge in pleasure. However, most of the history was fabricated. I was afraid that what he said was the truth. It seemed that Wang Hai was an infatuated man. Although the matter between him and Wen seemed to go against human ethics, there was no right or wrong in love. This was something I knew very well. Thinking about this, I heaved a sigh of relief. I didn't dare to comment on this matter, but the infatuated man in front of me was suffering. From his previous words, I knew that the monk was a bhikkhu. It seemed that this matter was also related to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva had given me another difficult problem. I didn't know if he wanted me to help Wang Hai or take him away. From the bottom of my heart, I was inclined to take him away. Not to mention the fact that he would be a good helper if he stayed by my side. I couldn't let him suffer in this place because of the blood connection between us. After thinking for a while, I told him my plan. To my surprise, Wang Hai shook his head and knelt down. My ancestor has ordered me to follow. However, I've been waiting here for more than 1,000 years, hoping to see Wen one day. If I can see her again, I'm willing to let her disappear now. After listening to him, my heart tightened. I couldn't help but think of Bai-un, who was still waiting for me in the Fire God Temple. Bai-un and I, Wang Hai and Wen, although our experiences were different, the twists and turns were similar. Could it be that infatuation could be inherited through the blood? I was silent for a while, hesitating about what to do. He had mentioned that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had told him before he left that he could only see Wen after he had completely let go of his obsession. I couldn't bear to let him stay here, but he didn't want to leave with me. The only thing I could do was to help him let go of his obsession and see Wen. Wang Hai didn't respond to my words. He just kept shaking his head and muttering the word obsession. Seeing him like that, I frowned. The obsession that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had mentioned was the reason why Wang Hai had been here for several thousand years. If I asked him to let go of his obsession, wouldn't it be the same as asking him to let go of Wenning? What would be the point of him waiting for several thousand years? Even if he could enter the netherworld and see Wenning, what would be the point? I couldn't bear it. I wanted to talk to him, but I swallowed my words. If I were in Wang Hai's shoes, I'd probably make the same choice as him. At this moment, Wang Hai was crouching on the ground, holding his head. He kept muttering the word obsession. After a long time, he finally quieted down. He sat on the ground and didn't move, looking at the roof blankly. Chapter 766. Although I was Emperor Ku's reincarnation and Wang Hai didn't have any direct connection with me, as the saying goes, blood is thicker than water. But as the old saying goes, blood is thicker than water. Seeing him like this, I naturally didn't feel bad, but I couldn't abandon him at this time. With that thought, I slowly walked to his side and squatted down. I said softly, "I know that you are suffering in your heart, and I have experienced matters of the heart. However, if you continue to sink like this, I'm afraid that you will never see the light of day again. Moreover, after 1,000 years of great changes, when Yun might have already reincarnated a few times. If you really meet her one day, she might not be able to recognize you. Then what is the meaning of your 1,000 years of obsession?" I naturally knew that these few words wouldn't be able to make him completely let go. However, if no one helped him, perhaps no one would be able to persuade him anymore. Since I had the identity of Emperor Ku, as an elder, I had to say these words. As for the crux of the matter, he needed to comprehend it himself. After listening to my words, Wang Hai came back to his senses after a long time. He looked at me with his empty eyes. I didn't know what he was thinking, but his eyes were filled with endless sorrow. However, since he had a reaction, it meant that he had listened to my words. After a long time, he stood up shakily. He first cupped his hands towards me, then said, "Hai understands the meaning of the ancestors' words. However, fate makes fools of people. Hai has no choice but to accept his fate." From what he said, he obviously didn't intend to give up. I smacked my lips and continued to console him. Previously, Bodhisattva also said that you have to let go of the obsession in your heart to return to the 9 hells. If you can reincarnate, perhaps you will have the chance to meet Wen. However, if you insist on doing so, then the last trace of hope will be gone. Do you understand? After listening to my words, Wang Hai's body trembled slightly. His fleshless mouth opened and closed. After a long time, he finally said, "Is there really a chance? I wasn't sure about this. After all, reincarnation was determined by the heavenly Tao. How could an ordinary person make wild guesses?" However, I didn't tell him my true thoughts, and only continued to console him. Even the heavens won't cut off a person's path. You're so infatuated. From what I see, you and Wen will eventually cross paths after being together for 1,000 years. After Wang Hai heard this, he stayed in place for a long time without making a sound. No one knew what he was thinking. After a moment, he stopped moving and let out a long sigh of relief. He must have made a decision in his heart. Then, he knelt down in front of me and said, "Hai Wan died and couldn't serve the ancestors. Please take care of yourself in the future." His words indicated that he had finally decided to let it go. It seemed that my previous words had taken effect. On the contrary, I was glad for him, instead of feeling sad about it. Although children and grandchildren have their own blessings, seeing that he was able to let go was something worth celebrating for both him and me. I helped him up and looked at him again. I felt a surge of warmth in my heart. After a long time, he finally said, "Go." After saying that, I wanted to say something to him, but I didn't know what to say. In the end, I just nodded at him. Wang Hai didn't speak again, but knelt down and kowtowed to me again. Then, He stood up and looked at the dusky distance before letting out a long roar. His voice was still mournful, but there was also a hint of relief. It was as if he was spitting out all the resentment that he had accumulated in his heart for many years. As his voice gradually weakened, his huge skeletal body suddenly collapsed and the white bones scattered on the ground. Following that, a cloud of white mist rose up and gradually formed a somewhat blurry soul. At this moment, I could finally see Wang Hai's appearance clearly. It wasn't much different from what I had imagined, but there was a hint of relief. Wang Hai's soul cupped his hands towards me and said respectfully, "This item is formed from my lifetime's cultivation. Please accept it, ancestor. Perhaps it will be of use in the future." As soon as he said that, the scattered bones turned into powder and gathered in one place. After a few seconds, the powder condensed into a walnut-sized bead. The bead seemed to be able to sense it, so it slowly flew to my hand. At this moment, I wasn't in the mood to check the bead as I was concentrating on Wang Hai's soul. His soul started to vanish, but he still wore a smile on his face. When half of his body had disappeared, he said to me, "Take care." However, before I could reply, his soul vanished into the darkness. The scene in front of me stunned me. Although I felt relieved, I felt that I had lost something. Although Wang Hai and I had only known each other for a few hours, I had found the warmth of a family member's company. Perhaps I had immersed myself in the role of Emperor Ku too much, which made me feel a little lost. But then again, his soul had returned to the 9 serenities. It was the best ending for him to be reincarnated. After a long time, I pulled myself out of my thoughts. I wasn't in a hurry to go to the 4th floor. I sat down and carefully played with the bead Wang Hai had given me. The entire body of this pearl was pure white, but it faintly exuded a chilling aura. If it weren't for this aura, it would look like a giant eastern pearl. According to Wang Hai, this thing was the result of his lifetime cultivation. Prince Knight's corpse was a great ancient monster. Although I didn't know his exact realm, I was sure he was very powerful. The energy inside this bead was also extraordinary. However, the energy inside wasn't shaman energy or Tao energy. It was more like Yin energy. It seemed this thing didn't have any value to me. Anyway, it was good to keep it as a souvenir. Then, I didn't linger any longer. I threw the bead into the Shangliu pouch and stood up. Holding the bead, I walked along the stone wall and went deeper. This time, it didn't take me long to find the entrance. This entrance was different from the previous ones. It wasn't made of iron or gold. It was made of a transparent material that looked like glass. I studied it for a while, but I couldn't find anything. I didn't linger on this matter and stepped forward. I thought that the 4th floor would be like the previous floors, a dark place. I didn't expect to find myself standing on a lawn. In front of me was a majestic mountain. However, the appearance of this mountain gave me a familiar feeling. Suddenly, I remembered that the mountain in front of me was very similar to Mount Taihang. After studying it for a while, I had a definite answer. This mountain was a branch of Mount Taihang. After confirming it, I couldn't help but feel suspicious. I clearly remembered going to the entrance of the 4th floor of the Spirit Lock Tower. Why did I appear at the foot of Mount Taihang? Could it be that there was a problem with the Spirit Lock Tower's restriction that sent me here? Before I could figure it out, 2 people came from the mountain path, one in front of the other. From their pace, it was clear that they were coming for me. Due to the distance, I couldn't see their faces clearly. However, I felt a little nervous. I became vigilant and clenched my fists. When he was a little nearer, I saw that he had a familiar face. Whether it was his height or the way he walked, he looked like Yen Nantian. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel shocked. I clearly remembered that Yen Nantian had already died. Why would he appear here? Before I could react, the person was already in front of me. He extended his hand towards me and patted my shoulder. "Nantian, long time no see. How have you been doing in the past few years?" After hearing this, my body shook. I couldn't believe my ears. Although this person was only around 20 years old, I couldn't be more familiar with his face. Why did he call me Nantian? Could it be that he wasn't Yen Nantian? Then who was he? I had a series of questions in my mind, but I didn't dare to open my mouth to ask. Suddenly, a light flashed in my mind. I remembered that I had seen a person that looked exactly like Yen Nantian in the secret passage of the corpse sect. That person was the great elder of the corpse sect, Yen Dongyu. Since the person in front of me wasn't Yen Nantian, then it must be Yen Dongyu. But why did he call me Nantian? Could it be, thinking about this, I hastily reached out to touch my face. Although I could only roughly feel it, I could already conclude that this face wasn't my own. It was extremely similar to Yen Dongyu's face. It was Yen Nanshan's face. After knowing this, my heart couldn't help but be overwhelmed with shock. What was going on? Why did I turn into Yen Nanshan's appearance? Didn't the corpse sect disappear? Why did it rise from the ashes? I found it hard to accept and pinched my arm. The obvious pain made me understand that I wasn't in a dream. I was completely stunned, and my mind was in a mess. Yen Dongyu saw that I didn't respond to him and was doing something strange. His eyes were filled with doubt and he asked, "Nantian, what's wrong? You looked as if your soul had left your body. Could it be that you're unhappy after returning to the sect?" I still didn't reply to him, and instead pondered in silence. I could conclude that I had indeed entered the 4th floor through the glass door of the 3rd floor of the Spirit Lock Tower. As for why I appeared here, I didn't know. However, from my previous experience, the space in this tower was extremely strange. Every floor had unpredictable things that happened. I was very clear on this point. Although the things that happened every time shocked me, I was always able to escape from danger and I also gained a lot of enlightenment. Since then, I faintly felt that everything that happened in the Spirit Lock Tower seemed to have been set up. There was a vein that I couldn't see leading me to complete a certain task. Only after completing it would I be able to smoothly reach the next floor. Because of this, I firmly believed that I hadn't transmigrated to the corpse sect. I was here to complete the task of the 4th floor. Chapter 767. Yen Dongyu saw that I didn't respond and waved his hand in front of my eyes. He frowned and asked, "Nantian, what's wrong with you?" After his interruption, I came back to my senses and looked at him. I explained in a low voice, "It's nothing, big brother. Let's return to the sect first." I knew that I wasn't Yen Nantian, so I subconsciously lowered my voice. However, when I opened my mouth, I discovered that not only did I look like Yen Nantian, but my voice was also similar to Yen Nanshan's, just that it was a little more childish. After hearing my words, Yen Dongyu didn't suspect anything. He just slightly nodded and turned around to walk in front of me. The path that we were taking was the same path that I had taken to the corpse sect with Wei Samping for the first time. As Yen Dongyu brought me along, he asked me if I had encountered any interesting things in the past few years. After listening to him, I didn't dare to be careless. It wouldn't be good if I was careless and exposed myself. Although I knew that I was in the 4th floor of the Spirit Lock Tower, everything around me felt very real. This matter seemed to be a task that I had to complete, so after thinking for a moment, I replied cautiously. I randomly made up some things but didn't go into detail. Fortunately, I had some understanding of the corpse sect and Yen Dongyu had never left the sect before, so he didn't know anything about the outside world. After listening to me, he started to grumble. He said that Master was biased and only allowed me to travel alone. He said that I was talented and that after traveling, my cultivation would greatly increase. After saying that, Yen Dongyu was silent for a moment before turning around and asking me what my current cultivation was. Since it happened so suddenly, I didn't have the time to check my body's condition. After hearing his question, I quickly closed my eyes and found that my Heavenly Seal Master cultivation had disappeared. There wasn't even a trace of shaman energy left. My current cultivation was only at the first acupoint sealing stage. After answering truthfully, Yen Dongyue's body shook. His eyes were filled with surprise as he said, "You've actually sealed acupoints? Doesn't that mean that you can go to the Black Zombie Cave to cultivate? TSK, TSK, TSK. No wonder Master said that you're a genius. You've already sealed acupoints at the age of 20. Your future is limitless, Nantian." After saying that, he patted my shoulder and turned around to continue walking. However, I could see a tinge of disappointment in his eyes. Perhaps he felt the difference between us. Based on my previous strength as a sealing heavenly master, just hitting my acupoints wouldn't cause any fluctuations in my heart. However, thinking back to when he was at the corpse sect, he learned from Wei Somping's memories that the corpse sect had very strict rules. Generally speaking, one had to reach Seeking Dragon by the age of 20, reaching acupoint by the age of 30, and becoming enlightened by the age of 40. Otherwise, when the sect lacked a source of corpses, it was very likely that they would be turned into corpse puppets. Looking at Yen Dongyue's realm, he seemed to be at the late stage of the dragon-seeking realm and was about to hit his acupoint. He was only a few years older than Yen Nantian. It seemed like he was one of the best among the younger generation of the corpse sect. However, he was still a bit inferior to Yen Nantian. On the way, Yen Dongyue didn't say anything. After we arrived at the corpse sect, he said to me, "Master told me to immediately go and see him after you return." After saying that, he waved his hand at me and walked away. Fortunately, I came to the corpse sect before and stayed here for a while. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have been able to find this place. According to Yen Dongyue's strength, he should be living in the White Zombie Cave. The master that he mentioned should be one of the temple masters of the White Zombie Cave. After I had an answer in my heart, I immediately went to the White Zombie Cave. Along the way, I met a lot of corpse sect disciples. Perhaps they recognized me, but when they saw me, they only called me senior brother before hurriedly leaving. The corpse sect had strict rules and regulations. These disciples were busy cultivating every day. It seemed that Yen Nantian had some status in the White Zombie Cave for them to stop and greet me. At this moment, I was standing at the entrance of the White Zombie Cave and was somewhat worried. I had just passed by and didn't know what was going on inside. Although I had interacted with Yen Nantian before and knew a few things about him, most of it was after he became a heavenly master. However, I didn't know anything about the heavenly master. Moreover, I only had the appearance of Yen Nantian and didn't have any memories of him. It seemed that this mission would be difficult for me. Just as I was worrying, a middle-aged man walked out of the cave. From his appearance and clothes, he didn't seem to be a disciple of the White Zombie Cave. He seemed to be someone in charge. When he saw me standing there, he slightly frowned and asked, "Nantian, I've been waiting for you inside for a long time. Why are you standing here in a daze?" After hearing his words, I couldn't help but relax. I was just thinking about how to find Yen Nantian's master. I didn't think that he would come out by himself. This saved me a lot of trouble. I didn't immediately reply and instead looked at him. I couldn't see through his cultivation, but since he was able to accept disciples in the White Zombie Cave, his strength should be at the peak of the pressure point realm. When he saw that I didn't reply, his expression sank and he angrily shouted, "What are you waiting for? I'm asking you a question." After being yelled at by him, I finally reacted and hastily cupped my hands towards him. "Master, long time no see. Are you well?" The middle-aged man smacked his lips and waved his hand. With an unhappy expression, he said, "Forget it. Follow me." After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the White Zombie Cave. After seeing this, I didn't dare to slack off. I was afraid that I would give myself away, so I quickly followed him. Although I had stayed in the corpse sect for a period of time, I had reached the pressure point realm at that time. Most of my time was spent in the Black Zombie Cave, so it was my first time coming to the White Zombie Cave. While walking, I used my peripheral vision to observe the surroundings. Aside from the fact that the white zombie cave wasn't as big as the black zombie cave, there wasn't much of a difference. I guess that the caves of the corpse sect all look the same. Of course, the energy provided to the disciples in the caves was completely different. The disciples in the white zombie cave were all in the dragon-seeking realm, and some were not even in the dragon-seeking realm. The energy they used for cultivation was the lowest grade, the yellow grade energy. The black zombie cave, purple zombie cave, and flying zombie cave used the black grade, earth grade, and heaven grade energy. I followed the middle-aged man until we reached a room on the top floor of the white zombie cave. The middle-aged man pushed open the door and walked in. Soon after, he sat down on the main seat of the room. It seemed that this was the middle-aged man's room. After the middle-aged man sat down, he didn't say anything. It seemed that he was waiting for me to take action. Seeing this, I hurriedly walked forward and bowed before saying, "Disciple Yen Nantion greets Master." Although I didn't take this middle-aged man seriously, I was currently in the corpse sect. Moreover, I only had the strength of a pressure point realm expert. I wasn't sure if their attacks would be effective here, so I had to be careful. After seeing me like this, the middle-aged man responded after a long time. He gently nodded and said, "Stand up." I respectfully stood up and didn't hurry to speak. The middle-aged man looked at me and waved his hand, indicating that I should sit down and talk. After I sat down, he looked at me and said, "When I returned from my trip, I saw that you have reached the pressure point realm. It seems that my white zombie cave can't keep you here. That's fine. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the black zombie cave and find you another master." After hearing his words, I was a bit surprised at first, but I immediately understood. The corpse sect did have such a rule. As long as a disciple of the corpse sect reached a higher realm, they must immediately go to a cave of the same level to report. Not only that, but they must also find a new master to cultivate with. It seemed that the relationship between the master and disciple of the corpse sect wasn't very close. I didn't need to think about how to face this cheap master. Thus, I expressionlessly nodded. After bowing again, I nodded and said, "Yes, I'll listen to master's arrangements." Having said this, he asked me some questions about my travels. This cheap master didn't seem to be too familiar with the outside world, so he didn't become suspicious after answering a few questions. After talking about my travels, he also talked about the internal affairs of the corpse sect. Naturally, he didn't ask me about these matters, so I didn't need to make up stories. I just silently listened and occasionally nodded. After talking for about half an hour, this cheap master encouraged me a few more times, telling me to cultivate properly and not slack off. Only then did he finally let me go. After leaving, I let out a sigh of relief. Although the conversation was easy, I was still vigilant and spent a lot of energy. Now that I was out, I could finally relax. According to what this cheap master said, the person he was going to take me to tomorrow was the Black Zombie Cave's cave master. He also said that the cave master had always been optimistic about Yen Nanshan's talent, so he specifically told me that after Yen Nantion returned, if his acupoints were already sealed, I must take him as my master. After saying this, the middle-aged man's eyes shined. It seemed that he worshipped the Black Zombie Cave's cave master. With the strength of the corpse sect, his appearance was understandable. Moreover, a normal cave master's strength was far greater than a temple master's. It seemed that the Black Zombie Cave's cave master's strength was definitely not ordinary. He was at least at the late stage of the glorious era. Not only that, I also learned from him that the annual competition would begin in a few days. He also told me to hurry up and cultivate so that I could get a good ranking. I knew about the corpse sect's annual competition because I had experienced it when I was disguised as Wang Lin, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. Because I still didn't know anything about Yen Nantion, I couldn't find Yen Nanshan's room by myself. In the end, I decided to go ask around. I knew that this was a bit inappropriate, but without my cultivation to rely on, I had no other choice. I could only brace myself and find a senior disciple that passed by to greet me. I told him that I had been away for a long time and forgot where I lived. Only then did I find my cave under his strange gaze. After closing the door to the cave, I was the only one left. Only then did I relax. I sat on the edge of the bed and began to ponder the situation. I don't know what kind of magic the Spirit Lock Tower has to be able to turn me into Yen Nantian and bring me to the corpse sect. This kind of method is really unimaginable. Chapter 768. I laid on the bed for a long time, unable to sort out my thoughts. Although this wasn't the first time I had come to the corpse sect, my current identity was different. Moreover, I wasn't familiar with this place. In order to avoid contact with others, I didn't go out. I stayed in the cave and tried to figure out the ins and outs of this matter, but I still couldn't find any clues. Early the next morning, my chief master, Temple Master Chen, brought me to the Black Zombie Cave and had me become the disciple of the cave master. This person was different from Temple Master Chen. He was very eccentric and didn't say a word to me. He directly brought me to a dark cave and had me choose a cultivation technique there. Although it was said that he was choosing, the cave was actually very dark. With Yen Nanshan's current acupoint cultivation, he couldn't see anything. He could only feel his way forward. Who would have thought that after a few steps, his hand would touch something that looked like a piece of silk? Then, a light flashed in the distance and his body flew backwards. When he opened his eyes again, he was back outside the cave. The corpse sect's method of imparting cultivation techniques was quite interesting. As I reported the situation to the Black Zombie Cave Lord, I lowered my head to take a look and found that the technique recorded on the silk was the Yellow Springs Ascension technique that I had obtained from Yen Nantian. So this cultivation technique came from this place. After bidding farewell to the Black Zombie Cave Master, I returned to my cave and began to cultivate according to the Yellow Springs Ascension technique. Yen Nanshan's cave only had mysterious yin qi, so his cultivation speed couldn't be compared to before. There was no sense of time in the mountain, and the corpse sect was filled with cultivation devils. Normally, it was impossible to see anyone. Several years passed by like this. Due to the year-round nourishment of yin qi and Yen Nanshan's talent, he reached the glorious knowledge realm in less than 10 years. 30 years of glorious knowledge was already considered a top genius in the corpse sect. According to the rules, I had to move to the Purple Zombie Cave to continue cultivating. In the Dark Corpse sect, time seemed to pass much faster than the outside world. I seemed to have forgotten how long I had been here. My previous memories were already blurred, and I couldn't distinguish myself from Yen Nantian. After an unknown amount of years, Yen Nantian, or rather, I, had reached the peak of the Yin Qi Source Stone and was finally ready to advance to the Celestial Master Realm. Corpse sect disciples had 2 opportunities to refine corpse puppet. One was when they first started cultivating, and the other was when they advanced to the Celestial Master Realm. The sect gave me new corpse puppets. I threw away the old corpse puppet and refined it again, officially entering the Celestial Master Realm. After reaching the Heavenly Master Realm, the new corpse puppets displayed powerful abilities. Furthermore, they became more and more adept at using them. However, there was one time when I accidentally discovered that the corpse puppet was staring at me with a burning gaze while I was cultivating. I felt that something was wrong. It was hard to describe what kind of feeling this was, but in the following years, every time he cultivated, he would always be more vigilant, not daring to fully immerse himself in it. The cultivation of the Heaven Master Realm was originally extremely slow, but for some reason, when I cultivated, my progress was extremely fast. In just a few years, I touched the threshold of the Yang spirit. In the corpse sect, strength is everything. Once you reach the Yang God Celestial Master Realm, you can become the Grand Elder and have endless power. The excitement of improving my cultivation weakened my usual vigilance. Finally, when I mastered the Yang God's celestial master technique, the strange corpse puppet moved. After the Yang God left my body, I could see the surrounding environment, so I noticed the corpse puppet's movements. However, this was my first time cultivating the Yang God's celestial master technique, and I hadn't learned any Yang God spells yet. Moreover, I couldn't even retrieve my Yang God in a short time. So, I could only watch as the corpse puppet walked to my side. It suddenly grinned and attacked my body, destroying it in an instant. Before I could react, it reached out to grab my Yang God and opened its mouth as if it wanted to swallow me. But how could I let it succeed? If I was swallowed, wouldn't it mean that I would perish forever? So, I fought with it while trying to control my Yang God. Finally, I used all of my energy to repel it. I blankly looked at the torn body on the ground and couldn't help but feel a dull pain in my heart. From then on, I finally understood what was going on. I didn't dare to stay in the corpse sect any longer and ran away as fast as I could. However, I had been immersed in cultivation for so many years that I wasn't even familiar with the terrain of the corpse sect. In addition, I only had a Yang God body, so my mind wasn't complete. I aimlessly floated in the air, not knowing where to go. I didn't know where the road ahead of me was, but the regret in my heart was real. If I had been more vigilant and discovered the problem with the corpse puppet earlier, I wouldn't have ended up like this. I secretly swore that if I had the opportunity to rebuild my body in the future, I would definitely return this hatred countless times over. While I was thinking about this, the corpse sect had already discovered what had happened and began to hunt me down. There were many corpse sect disciples, and under the siege, I panicked and ran into the flying zombie cave. This was the cave of the corpse sect elder. For me, it was no different from a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. In the end, I was surrounded by the people of the corpse sect in a cave. In the midst of the chaos, a person walked out from the crowd of corpse sect disciples. It seemed to be Yen Dongyue. He pointed at me and cursed, "Yen Nantian, although you and I share the same mother, you betrayed the sect today. I have to clean up the sect. Surrender." I really admired the corpse sect's method. They were actually able to kill each other. I didn't want to argue and just frantically looked for an escape route. Eventually, I found a small hole in the wall of the cave. From this small hole, I entered the Inchi passage. This Inchi passage was the holy land of the corpse sect. After seeing me enter, the others didn't dare to chase me, so I managed to escape with my life. However, the Inchi in this Inchi passage was very dense, and I only had a Yang spirit body. Under the stimulation of Yin and Yang, it was as if I had entered a magma furnace. The endless pain wasn't a big deal, but the most important thing was that I wouldn't be able to endure for long before being devoured by the Inchi. With no way out, I ran around in a chaotic state. I didn't know how long I had been walking, but I finally felt a trace of Yang Qi in the distance. At this time, my Yang spirit was on the verge of collapse. That trace of Yang Qi was like a distant lighthouse that attracted me to a cave. Relying on the Yang Qi here, my Yang spirit was able to survive. After an unknown amount of time, I finally regained my consciousness and recognized that this cave was the soul-devouring cave that the corpse sect used to punish their disciples. This soul-devouring cave was filled with Yang Qi. For a sect that cultivated Yin Qi like the corpse sect, this place was no different from hell. No one would come here to search, but after the Yang spirit left the body, it couldn't survive for long. I didn't know if it was fate, but when the Yang spirit was on the verge of dissipating, I found a stone slab in the soul-devouring cave. There seemed to be some kind of cultivation technique recorded on it. I didn't know if I could see the words clearly, but the Yang spirit had already begun to absorb the Yang Qi in the surroundings with the help of this cultivation technique. Relying on the Yang Qi here, my life was finally saved. However, in the endless years that followed, there was no way out. I could only hide in this small cave and taste the loneliness and resentment. The yang qi here could only be used to save my life, and couldn't be used to cultivate. Therefore, I couldn't see any hope of revenge in my endless resentment. Over the years, there were also disciples of the corpse sect who came here to be punished. However, I didn't dare to do anything in front of those disciples who carried corpse puppets with them and were covered in yin qi. Day after day, year after year, I didn't know how much time had passed. Finally, one day, the door of the cave was opened again, and a thin young man with a cold face walked in. Seeing this person, the 3 words Wei Samping suddenly appeared in my mind. While I was confused, I saw 2 completely different powers in his body. Dao Qi, Shaman Qi. In an instant, countless chaotic thoughts flooded my mind. I suddenly recovered my memories and realized that I wasn't Yen Nantian and that I wasn't in the corpse sect. I was on the 4th floor of the Spirit Lock Tower. After recovering my thoughts, I looked at the me in Wei Samping's appearance and vaguely grasped something in my mind. The Spirit Lock Tower had arranged for me to come here and experience Yen Nanshan's life. What was it trying to tell me? What was the point of having me become Yen Nantian? I seemed to understand. The Spirit Lock Tower wanted me to experience Yen Nanshan's entire life. It wanted me to understand how miserable Yen Nantian had been in the past. It wanted me to understand that there was a reason why Yen Nantian had such a temperament. He had taken my body for revenge, and to find justice for himself. If it hadn't been me who entered the soul-devouring cave that year, but someone else, he would have done the same. Thus, he wasn't targeting me. He just couldn't let go of the obsession in his heart. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel much better. It seemed that Yen Nantian wasn't as unbearable as I had imagined. It was just that he had lost himself because of what he had experienced. I suddenly felt that I didn't hate him as much as I did before. On the contrary, I felt some sympathy for him. If it was me, I would have made the same choice. This had nothing to do with right or wrong, but life and death. I stood up and heaved a sigh of relief. The soul-devouring cave in front of me suddenly collapsed. I subconsciously wanted to avoid it. However, when I came back to my senses, I found that I was standing in the Spirit Lock Tower, and my surroundings were still chaotic. After I calmed my mind and stretched my limbs, it seemed that I had finally passed this trial. Looking at the chaotic scene in front of me, I felt an inexplicable sense of enlightenment. It seemed that coming to the Spirit Lock Tower was something that had already been decided. Every time I passed through a floor, I would gain something. However, even now, I could only vaguely feel something in my mind. I still couldn't understand what this Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was trying to tell me. After a long period of silence, I didn't think too much about it. Since the matter of this floor had been resolved, there was no need to stay here. Thus, I took the prayer beads and wandered around. With my previous experience, I quickly found the entrance to the next floor. Chapter 769. I was now leaning against the wall, looking around at the situation on the 5th floor. Just like before, apart from being able to see 4 or 5 meters around me, there was nothing but chaos. According to what had happened before, there was definitely something waiting for me in this chaos. Thus, I wasn't in a hurry to find a place to go upstairs. Instead, I sat down and waited. When I was on the 4th floor, I had transformed into Yen Nantian and experienced his entire life. Of course, that was only the time in the illusion. In fact, I had only stayed on the 4th floor for a few hours. However, it was these few hours that made me feel mentally exhausted. As I waited, I adjusted my tense nerve. 4 hours passed quickly. My nerves were much more relaxed, but my surroundings were still very calm. Nothing had appeared. I gradually couldn't sit still anymore. The Spirit Lock Tower had a total of 7 floors, and there were still 2 floors above waiting for me. I couldn't stay here for too long. Since the phenomenon on this floor didn't show itself, I had to find it. Thus, I stood up and scattered my Tao energy in the air to sense what might exist in the void. This Spirit Lock Pagoda was extremely strange. The things in each level were all extremely powerful. Putting aside the fourth floor, the prince on the third floor, Knight's corpse, was an ancient monster. If there were strange creatures on the fifth floor, their power was unimaginable. Of course, I couldn't belittle myself. There would always be a way out. Although the previous floors had been very dangerous, I had passed smoothly in the end. If I had been fully prepared this time, I still had a chance of winning. With that in mind, I took out the Xianyuan sword from my mouth and held it tightly in my hand. At the same time, I mobilized the Tao energy in the veins of the heavens and sent it to the Xianyuan sword. After activating the Xianyuan sword, there wasn't much Tao energy left in my body. I quickly grabbed the jade bracelet in my hand and quickly absorbed the true dragon chi within it. With my current cultivation, I couldn't activate the Xianyuan sword in one go. Originally, I was worried that something was spying on me and would take the opportunity to attack me. Fortunately, that didn't happen. I heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, I felt a little uneasy. Logically speaking, that thing was very powerful. There was no need for it to hide with me. However, I had waited here for so long, but it still hadn't shown itself. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but feel a little terrified. He was afraid that it was hiding somewhere, waiting for an opportunity to strike. He was in the dark while I was in the light. If he caught me off guard, I might not be able to react in time. At this moment, I was already rather anxious. I definitely couldn't continue wasting my time here. There had to be a reason why he was hiding in the shadows and refusing to come out. Right now, I'm not in a hurry to find it and kill it, but to quickly find the way upstairs. As long as I can find the exit, it doesn't matter whether it shows itself or not. After making up his mind, he immediately took the prayer beads and walked along the wall step by step. As I walked, I still had to be vigilant of my surroundings. My nerves were constantly in a tense state, and my stamina consumption was also enormous. I had only walked half a circle when I started to pant. Since then, that thing still hadn't shown itself, and no one knew what it was planning. This place is chaotic, and I can't see anything beyond 5 meters. Currently, I didn't have a suitable helper to share my burden. I thought about letting Tong Tong and the serpent spirit come out. They were souls with strong senses. I was sure they could sense something strange in this floor. However, with my previous experience, I didn't dare to do that. Tong Tong and the serpent spirit were naturally suppressed by the spirit sealing tower, and their powers were greatly reduced. If I summoned them, not only would they not be able to protect themselves, but they would also distract me. I sat on the ground and rested for a while. Then, I picked up the prayer beads and continued to search. However, I couldn't find the exit even after walking around for a while. Instinctively, I thought that I had overlooked something. I looked around again, but the prayer beads still didn't react. This surprised me. I had used this method to get through the first 4 floors. Why didn't it work now? I slumped on the ground, feeling a little depressed. However, my mind was busy sorting out the situation on the first 4 floors. In the first few floors, besides encountering different monsters, all the exits were on the surrounding walls. However, I couldn't find the exit on the 5th floor. Did something happen to this floor? Maybe the exit wasn't on the wall, but somewhere else? Instinctively, I lifted my head to look at the chaotic area 5 meters away. If I couldn't find the exit on the stone wall, it should be in this dark area. The exit might be here, and the thing that was hiding in the 5th floor might also be hiding here. So, I didn't dare to let my guard down. I gripped the Xianyuan sword tightly, took a deep breath, and slowly walked in. I was very careful with each step. Soon, I felt a pressure that I had never felt before. The further I walked, the stronger the pressure became. My palms started to sweat. My nerves were tense, and I didn't dare to look around. I was about to reach the center, but the prayer beads still didn't react. I became even more skeptical. I had walked around the walls of this floor, so I had a rough idea of how big this place was. According to my previous experience, The prayer beads would change when they were around 5 meters away from the exit. However, they didn't react at all. What was going on? Was it possible that the method to find the exit here was different from the previous floors? Thinking about that, my heart tightened. If that was the case, the previous method wouldn't work here. What should I do next? I didn't know what to do at the moment. I had walked around the center for a long time, but I couldn't find the exit. I also couldn't find the thing that was watching me. However, the pressure in my heart was still there, and it was getting stronger and stronger. To be safe, I slowly retreated and leaned against the wall to observe the chaotic area in front of me. I was thinking about how to solve this situation. Was it possible that there was no exit on this floor? Or, did I have to kill the thing hiding in the dark before the exit would be revealed? I kept making guesses in my heart. Under that intense pressure, I couldn't figure out the answer. Instead, the frustration in my heart grew stronger and stronger. There was an indescribable impatience that made me stand up and walk towards the chaos. Whether my guess was correct or not, I had to find the thing hiding in the dark to feel safer. It was strange. I knew that the thing hiding here was strong, but I wasn't afraid at all. I walked to the center of the floor and released my Tao energy. Then I shouted, "Get out here! Why are you so afraid? If you have the guts, fight with me." Although he was stronger than me, the Heavenly Master, couldn't be underestimated. His roar contained thick Tao energy, which dispelled the darkness in the surroundings. However, there was still no response after a long time. This time I was really impatient. I swung my sword in the air. The Xianyuan sword's sword energy had the power to cut through the sky, and the entire floor shook. The surrounding air exploded, stirring up clouds of dust. However, when the dust settled, there was still no response from the monster. I was furious. I took out dozens of burning sun talismans from my Xianglu bag and threw them in the air. Then, I used the Heavenly Master's one-word technique. The burning sun talismans exploded, and the sky was filled with fire. The entire floor was swallowed by the fire. It wasn't over yet. I immediately stepped out of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper and swung the Xianyuan sword in my hand. I felt a chill in my heart. No matter where the monster was hiding, it couldn't avoid my attacks. However, this series of attacks had consumed a lot of my energy. I couldn't stand still. This was my weakest moment, and I couldn't let the monster have a chance to attack me. I held the jade bracelet and started to absorb the dragon energy. After a long time, I recovered. During this time, I kept an eye on the surroundings, but I didn't notice anything strange. All of a sudden, I had a bold guess. Perhaps there was no monster on this floor. Otherwise, my previous attacks would have hurt him. Even I was a little shocked by this thought. If it was really as I thought, and there were no monsters or exits on this floor, wouldn't I have to stay here for the rest of my life? Thinking about this, I shook my head violently. This thought made me anxious and fearful. Previously, I had already noticed that every floor had a special setting. It seemed that I had to complete a certain mission before I could smoothly go upstairs. However, I didn't see any monster, and I didn't know where to go upstairs. I had no clue what task I had to complete on this floor. What the heck is Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva doing? Calculating the time, I had already been here for nearly a day, but I still hadn't made any progress. I had a feeling that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had deliberately trapped me here, but I didn't know why. A few more days passed. My mood was very low, and I could only vent the anger in my heart at the emptiness. However, it didn't change anything. I still couldn't get out. Gradually, loneliness and despair engulfed me. I tried to summon Tong Tong and the snake spirit to ask them if they had a solution. However, there seemed to be some kind of restriction that prevented me from contacting them. Even Lu Ruxu, who was hiding in the green lamp scroll, couldn't hear me. Countless emotions surged in my heart. Anxiety, fear, and despair pushed me to the brink of collapse. The enclosed space and the dim light filled every corner with the aura of death. I even had the thought of seeking death. Chapter 770. Just as I thought that I was about to be freed, a voice suddenly popped up in my head. Husband, husband. This was the voice of Bai, and that I had been thinking about day and night. Why could I hear her calling at this moment? Could it be that she was also here? Thinking of this, my body suddenly shook and I quickly opened my eyes. All I saw was darkness, and I couldn't even see my fingers in front of me. Hearing Bai-An's voice, I was a little worried. Then I shouted, Bai-An, is that you? Where are you? After saying that, there was no response for a long time. I shook my slightly heavy head and looked at the darkness in front of me. Only then did I realize that the voice just now was just an illusion. Even so, that voice temporarily broke the loneliness that had enveloped me during this period of time. It made me feel slightly refreshed, and I recalled what had happened earlier. In an instant, beads of sweat appeared on my forehead. There was nothing on the 5th floor of the Spirit Lock Tower. It was just a lonely environment, but it stimulated the anxiety in my heart to the point that I wanted to die. How could this be? After cultivating for many years, I thought that my mind was still considered strong. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for me to be like this. There must be some kind of power in the Spirit Lock Tower that affected me. Could it be that the danger here was affecting my emotions? I frowned and thought about what had happened earlier. It seemed that I had grasped something. Perhaps it was as I had thought before, that there were no monsters on this floor, but there must be an exit. It was just that it was not time to open the exit. The reason why I had the thought of committing suicide was because I was trapped here, and I couldn't see any hope of leaving. I felt endless loneliness, resentment, and despair in my heart. These negative emotions eroded my heart, forcing me to break down and die silently. After thinking about this, I more or less understood what the mission of this floor was. It was to overcome the fear in my heart. I put my hand on the jade bracelet and began to absorb the dragon energy inside. After a few minutes, I recovered. I paused and mobilized the Tao energy in my body. I shouted, "The Book of Changes is clear. Bodhisattva, please open the door." As soon as I said that, the black fog that had enveloped me dissipated, and the scene in front of me returned to normal. I let out a long breath, took out the prayer beads, and walked along the wall. This time, I didn't go far before the prayer beads reacted. I stepped through the door in the wall, and was thus on the 6th floor. Most of the floors looked the same, so I didn't observe them carefully. I took out the Xian Yuan sword and stood at the same spot, waiting for the monster on this floor. But just like before, there was still no movement in the surroundings even after a long time. I frowned and slowly walked forward. Unexpectedly, as soon as I took my first step, the scenery around me changed drastically. I was currently standing on top of a cliff. Below the cliff should have been a lush forest, but it was currently burning with raging flames. I was stunned by this sudden change. It instantly reminded me of the scene on the 4th floor. He couldn't help but have some doubts in his heart. Could it be that he had transformed me into someone else this time? Thinking to this point, I lowered my head and looked at my own clothes. I was still wearing my own clothes, and I still held the Xianyuan sword tightly in my hand. I wasn't sure. I immediately closed my eyes to sense the Tao Qi and Shaman Qi in my body. After confirming that there was no mistake, I slowly opened my eyes to check my surroundings. This place was desolate and uninhabited, so it was impossible to determine my current location. I followed the small path behind me down the mountain. Along the way, I could see broken rocks and broken branches of trees. It was as if a battle had happened here. I looked around but didn't pay much attention to it. I just didn't know what would happen here. When I reached the bottom of the mountain, I saw a small village in front of me. However, this village seemed a little strange. It wasn't a house made of green bricks, but rather, it was made of grass and trees. It was similar to the houses of the Kuei-Nyo tribe that I had seen in the Lubo Mountain. Seeing this, I muttered in my heart. For such a building to appear here, it was possible that it was even older than the era that I had lived in. Looking at the surrounding ruins, it seemed that something had happened here. With doubts in my mind, I slowly walked into the village. At this moment, I didn't dare to be careless. Since the Spirit Lock Tower had brought me to such a place, there was definitely a problem that needed to be solved. Correspondingly, there would definitely be danger. As I walked, I looked around vigilantly. Until I entered the village, there was nothing strange. Right at that moment, I heard a shout. It seemed that the person had encountered something and was calling for help. I didn't hesitate and ran towards the source of the sound. From afar, I saw a hairy fellow squatting on the ground. His mouth was panting as he chewed on something. When I got closer, I could see clearly that there was a person wearing animal skin lying in front of him. That person's limbs were scattered on the ground. The brown-haired fellow was holding the head of the person on the ground. Seeing this, my heart tightened. This scene was a little too bloody. At this moment, the hairy fellow seemed to have sensed something as he turned his head to look at me. At this moment, I could see his appearance clearly. He had the face of a cow and 2 pairs of scarlet horns on his forehead. Although he had the appearance of a cow, he had human hands and feet. Moreover, he could walk upright. At this moment, he was already walking towards me. His appearance reminded me of a ferocious beast that I had read about in an ancient book, the Bayan. According to the ancient book, the Bayan was one of the 4 ferocious beasts in ancient times. The 4 ferocious beasts referred to the 4 types of monsters that were the totems of the 4 tribes in ancient times. It was said that the Bayan came from the mountain of 3 perils. It looked like a cow with 4 horns on its white body. Its fur was as thick as a cape. Its name was Bayan, and its nature was to eat humans. Thinking of this, I subconsciously took a few steps back. I had never thought that there would be a Bayan in this place. Could it be that the Spirit Lock Pagoda had sent me to the ancient times? I was frightened. If that was the case, wouldn't I be in great danger? The Bayan saw me in a daze and sped towards me. In just a few seconds, it was in front of me. Now that I was closer, I could see how terrifying it was. That pair of scarlet eyes made my hair stand on end. Before I could react, it had already stretched out its big hands to grab me. I didn't dare to let it have its way. If it caught me, I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get rid of it in a short time. Instinctively, I dodged to the side. Seeing that it couldn't catch me, it was a little angry. It clenched its hands into fists and attacked me from the side. Fortunately, I reacted in time and easily dodged the attack. It seemed that although the Bayan had a ferocious appearance, it wasn't very strong. It was only equivalent to an ordinary heavenly master. I didn't think much of it. Since it couldn't catch me twice, it was thoroughly enraged this time. After stomping its feet, its aura surged and its body started to grow. It only stopped when it was 3 meters tall. It thought that it could intimidate me with this method, but it wasn't enough. Without waiting for it to make a move, I took out the armor remover sword from my Xiang Lu pouch. As for the Xian Yuan sword, I had already put it back into my body. Since I had already guessed that this was an ancient, desolate land, I couldn't casually use the Xian Yuan sword to avoid being discovered. Next, I circulated the Tao energy in my body and transferred it to the armor remover sword. At this moment, the armor remover sword had already returned to its original form. Its body shone with a golden light and the sword energy created waves of heat in the surrounding air. I saw that the Bayan had lifted its foot and was about to stomp on me. I didn't dare to be careless and dodge the attack. After I landed, I waved the armor remover sword towards the Bayan. The Bayan probably didn't expect me to have such a move. Before it could dodge, the sword energy of the armor remover sword had already reached its face. It crossed its arms in front of its chest in an attempt to block the attack. Although it was an ancient beast, there was still a difference in power between us. It couldn't easily block the attack. Its huge body retreated a few meters. The sword energy exploded on its arms, tearing its skin and flesh apart. Seeing this, I didn't want to give it a chance to breathe. I stepped into the 9-star Heavenly Dipper and gathered Tao energy in the armor remover sword. I took the last step, insight. Only then did I wave the armor remover sword towards the Baian's face. It was obvious that it hadn't recovered from the previous attack. I immediately launched another attack. At this moment, it panicked and quickly turned to run. However, before it could take a few steps, the sword energy had already cut its back, cutting its body in half. As its body fell, I retracted my stance. I walked to the side of the person that had been eaten by the Baian. His limbs and head were only left with a few shreds of flesh. The sight of it made my scalp go numb. I stood on the spot and started to survey the surrounding situation. Since this was a village, there definitely wouldn't be only one person. However, there weren't any traces of other people in the surroundings. Could it be that they had all been eaten by the Baian? Thinking about that, I turned and glared at the corpse of the Baian. Since I had come to this barren land from the 6th floor of the Spirit Lock Tower, the mission should be for me to kill these beasts that harmed humans. However, from what I knew, other than the beasts, there were also the monster race and the witch race in this barren land. They stood on the opposite side of the human race. Moreover, the world was so vast, how could I protect the human race? At that moment, a thought flashed through my mind. I realized that I was the reincarnation of Emperor Ku and Monster Emperor June. In other words, I was both a human and a monster race. I would definitely protect the human race with all my might. However, if I were to meet the monster race, what should I do? Chapter 771. I had been in the wildlands for several months and had killed many ferocious beasts. Fortunately, they weren't very strong, so I could defeat them in a few moves. With what I had seen and heard in the past few months, I gradually had some ideas. Although I had often heard the sacrificial evil spirit mention the tragedy of the ancient war, I had been too shocked by the scene to notice the hidden problems. It was obvious that the war was mainly for the control of this world. Since ancient times, this had always happened when the dynasties changed. It was hard to tell who was right and who was wrong. It was just that the strength of the two sides wasn't balanced, but in the end, the inferior human race had won. The problems within were truly worth pondering. I was sitting in the house and talking with my clansmen. Since I had helped them kill a ferocious beast a few days ago, they had invited me to stay in the village. While we were talking, a scream came from outside. I had heard too many screams in the wildlands in the past few months. I hurriedly stood up and rushed out. I saw a tiger with black wings on the ground, gnawing on a corpse. The head of the corpse had been bitten to pieces, and blood was gushing out. The people in the surroundings had already hidden far away and didn't dare to look at it. The tiger's body was emitting a black mist. It seemed to be much stronger than the ferocious beasts I had killed earlier. It seemed to have sensed my gaze and raised its head to look at me. Its dark green eyes were filled with murderous intent. I was startled. This thing's appearance and posture were exactly the same as the Cheongqi that was recorded in the ancient book. Cheongqi and the swan Enai that I had killed earlier were the 4 great ancient ferocious beasts. However, this Cheongqi was much stronger than the swan Enai. It was said that Cheongqi looked like a tiger with hedgehog fur and wings. It was called the Cheongqi beast. Its appearance was extremely ugly, and it chased after demons and evils. Hence, it was called the divine dog. This Cheongqi didn't look easy to deal with. At this moment, it was walking towards me. I didn't dare to be careless and quickly took out the armor-removing sword. Then, I mobilized my Tao energy and prepared to face the enemy. When it was around 3 meters away from me, it stopped and looked at me with interest. The murderous intent in its eyes had dissipated a lot. This puzzled me. I stopped what I was doing and stared at it. Unexpectedly, it suddenly opened its big mouth and roared at me. His voice was like the roar of a tiger or a dragon. It was deafening. The sudden attack almost made me lose my footing. I shook my heavy head, raised my armor-stripping sword, and stepped out of the 9-star heavenly dipper. As the last step of insight fell, the armor-removing sword Chi in his hand went straight for Cheongchi. In the face of this sword Chi, Cheongchi still stood on the spot, not reacting at all, allowing the sword Chi to approach its body. I thought that it was subdued by my attack, but the moment the sword energy touched its body, it opened its mouth and swallowed the sword energy. It looked as if it wasn't hurt at all. I couldn't help but be shocked. I didn't expect Cheongchi to have such a trick. After pondering for a moment, I closed my eyes and took out my Saint Seal. As soon as the seal appeared, Cheongchi's face showed a trace of uneasiness. Its body was slowly retreating. How could I let it go so easily? I quickly pointed at it. The Celestial Master Seal received my order and quickly flew to Cheongchi's head. The Celestial Master Seal quickly hovered in the air and created a Chi barrier that covered Cheongchi. Back then, my Celestial Master Seal had suppressed Heavenly Yiksha to the point that he couldn't breathe. Cheongchi naturally wouldn't feel good now. I took the chance to use the Celestial Master's one-word technique. Kneel. As soon as I used the technique, Cheongchi's body trembled. It was about to kneel. However, at that moment, Cheongchi slowly lifted its head and roared again. The black mist on its body thickened as it withstood my Celestial Master's one-word technique. I smacked my lips. Cheongchi's power seemed to be stronger than Heavenly Yiksha. It seemed that I wouldn't be able to kill it in a short period of time. However, I couldn't continue fighting with it like this. Summoning the Celestial Master Seal had consumed a lot of my Dao Qi. As time went on, my power would definitely weaken. At that time, the Qi barrier would break on its own. Cheongchi seemed to have realized this as it had a relaxed expression. It gave me goosebumps. Even though I still had a trump card, I couldn't use the Xianyuan sword rashly in this desolate land. Otherwise, it would attract a lot of trouble. After pondering for a moment, I summoned the spirit snake. Even though it hadn't completely transformed into a winged dragon, its power was still quite good. With its help, killing Cheongchi shouldn't be a problem. As soon as the spirit snake appeared, it curiously stared at Cheongchi without waiting for me to say anything. However, after staring for a long time, it didn't make a move. Instead, it turned to ask me, "What is that? It looks like a tiger. Why does it have wings?" At that moment, I was already having a hard time. Seeing its curious expression, I couldn't help but scold it and ask it to stop researching and help. The spirit snake chuckled and turned back to its original form. Then, it pounced on Cheongchi. I heaved a sigh of relief as the spirit snake joined the battle. I retrieved the Celestial Master Seal to prevent its Dao Qi from harming the spirit snake. When Cheongchi saw the spirit snake's original form, its body started to shiver in fear. It was obvious that the spirit snake's nature was superior to Cheongchi in a battle between a tiger and a dragon. I sat cross-legged and didn't want to get involved. I held the jade bracelet in my hand and began to recover my strength. The spirit snake forced Cheongchi to retreat. Seeing that Cheongchi was at a disadvantage, it flapped its wings and prepared to escape. The spirit snake wouldn't let it go so easily. It chased after it and bit its tail. Cheongchi felt pain and turned around to spit a mouthful of black smoke at the spirit snake. The spirit snake sensed that the smoke wasn't normal and quickly loosened its mouth. Seizing the chance, Cheongchi sped up and fled. The spirit snake didn't want to give up. It twisted its body and followed Cheongchi. When I saw that, I wanted to call the spirit snake back. However, before I could say anything, its figure disappeared. I couldn't help but worry. This was a barren land. If the spirit snake met a human expert, he would be mistaken for a monster. Then, it would be troublesome. With that thought in mind, I stood up and used my Dao Qi to chase after the spirit snake. However, after chasing for a while, the spirit snake's aura disappeared. Suddenly, Several auras of Dao Qi appeared in the surroundings. I was startled. Could it be that he's in danger? I hurried to find the source of the Dao Qi. As I got closer, I could feel that the person who had released the Dao Qi was very strong. He was at least at the early stage of the Seal Heavenly Master realm. Apart from the Dao Qi, there seemed to be other auras, but I couldn't tell. When I got there, I didn't hurry to go there. Instead, I found a place to check the situation. I was startled by what I saw. There was no sign of Qiong Qi or the spirit snake. Instead, there were two groups of people fighting. Looking at their attire, one side was a human, while the other side was lined up with animals that hadn't transformed into humans. It seemed that they were from the monster race. There were many experts on the human side. The Dao Qi that I had sensed earlier should have been released by them. There were many people at the Heavenly Master realm. There were also people at the Glorious Knowledge realm and the Touch Acupoint realm. There were even ordinary people. However, I couldn't see through the power of the person standing at the front of the human race. It seemed that he was at least at the Yang God Celestial Master level. On the monster race's side, although there were a few monsters that hadn't transformed, most of them had taken form. I had heard from Yao Yao's mother that the monster race could only transform when they reached the Glorious Knowledge realm. It seemed that the monster race had far more people above the Glorious Knowledge realm than the human race. However, the cultivation method of the monster race was different from that of the human race. I couldn't see through their cultivation right away. I had to step into the clear insight realm to see through them. Unexpectedly, after stepping into the clear insight realm, I was shocked by the results. The number of Heavenly Master realm monsters in the monster race was double that of the human race. Moreover, there were many monsters that I couldn't see through. It seemed that the human race was going to suffer this time. Moreover, the human race was different from the monster race. The attacks of the human race didn't just rely on their cultivation. More importantly, they relied on the magic tools in their hand. However, the monster race was different. Their bodies were strong and their bodies could replace the functions of the magic tools. According to what I knew, during the Desolate Era, the development of resources was limited. It was impossible to create many magic tools. Most of the magic tools were just natural weapons. However, using these weapons to deal with the monster race's tyrannical bodies was like throwing an egg against a rock. It seemed that the outcome of the battle had already been decided before it had even started. I was currently standing far away. Although I was unhappy, I resisted the thought of going forward to help. Firstly, the spirit snake's whereabouts were unknown. I still had to search for him. Secondly, even if I were to help, I might not be able to defeat the monster race. After thinking about it, I prepared to leave to search for the spirit snake. At that moment, the battle at the foot of the mountain had finally started. Instantly, the sounds of fighting filled the sky. I couldn't help but stop in my tracks. I saw the human race and the monster race fighting. The human race's simple weapons were useless against the monsters. Instead, the monsters bit off the human's head in a few moves. That wasn't the end. It was obvious that the monsters didn't want to leave their corpses intact. After biting off the head, they started to tear off the torso. They didn't stop until they were completely shredded. I frowned when I saw such cruel methods. The Heavenly Master Realm experts soared into the sky. The attacks of the Heavenly Master Realm were really terrifying. Many of the attacks that didn't hit the opponent landed on the weaker people on the ground. The bodies of those who received such attacks instantly exploded. Chapter 772. I stood at my original position and looked at the great battle at the foot of the mountain. I had mixed feelings as I knew that it was just an illusion created by the Spirit Lock Pagoda, but everything in front of me was real. Seeing that my comrades had nowhere to hide from the sharp claws of the monster race, I really wanted to jump down the mountain and fight to the death with the monster race. However, I was too weak. Even if I went over, I wouldn't be able to do anything. As I thought about it, I suddenly felt sorrowful. Although I knew that the human race had obtained the final victory, the process was too cruel. At that moment, the human army had been defeated and had fled. The monster race didn't pursue them. Although they were powerful, they had suffered great losses in this battle. Very quickly, they disappeared from the battlefield. I stood at the peak of the mountain and observed everything. My heart couldn't calm down for a long time. At that moment, the spirit snake had completely disappeared. I temporarily put aside the idea of looking for it. My feet moved slightly and I landed on the battlefield. Previously, I had been standing far away and could only roughly understand the situation of the battlefield. It wasn't until I was personally involved that I realized the cruelty of the war. Dismembered corpses and broken arms could be seen everywhere. There were also many who perished together with the enemy. The scene was simply shocking. Imagine how much courage it would take for the ordinary human race to face such a cruel war. History books had recorded countless wars, big and small. If I hadn't witnessed it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have been able to understand the shock of the battlefield. Looking at the dismembered bodies of the human race's martyrs, I was in awe. I stood at my original position for a long time without moving. Only when the spirit snake jumped next to me did I come back to my senses. He was shocked to see such a heroic scene. Then, he asked me what had happened. I paused and told him what had happened. After listening to me, he remained silent. Then, he told me that he hadn't been able to kill Cheongchi. At that moment, Cheongchi's life wasn't important to me. What I was considering was how long the war between the humans and monsters would last and how to end it. The spirit snake stood next to me and didn't urge me to leave. After an hour, I sighed and brought him back to the village we had come from. I didn't know how long I would have to stay in this desolate land, but I couldn't stay in the village forever. Therefore, I planned to bid farewell to the villagers when I returned. After all, they were kind people. If I left without saying a word, it would be somewhat inappropriate. Unexpectedly, when I returned to the village with the snake spirit, another monster race army was wantonly slaughtering the villagers in the village. The anger in my heart was instantly ignited. I hadn't participated in the previous battle between the two armies because I knew that I wouldn't be able to change the outcome even if I went. However, the current situation was different. The monster race army in front of me wasn't as strong as before. Moreover, they had committed all sorts of crimes against the defenseless villagers. Although this was an illusion, I couldn't stand such a cruel scene. Even the spirit snake behind me was indignant. There was anger hidden in its eyes. Looking at the dozen heavenly master realm monsters in the monster army, I gestured to the spirit snake to be careful and try not to fight with them. The snake spirit nodded at me. Then, it transformed into its original form and flew towards the monster race. I took out the armor-removing sword and followed closely behind it. Very quickly, I killed a few weaker monsters. The leader, who was standing in the distance, frowned when he saw that my power was extraordinary. He gestured for the monster race to kill me first before killing the villagers. Hearing that, I instantly became vigilant. Although most of my subordinates were only at the Shuriao realm, there were only the spirit snake and I. I was afraid that we wouldn't be able to resist them for long. After thinking for a while, I called for Tong Tong and the spirit snake to come back. If the three of us were to split up, we might be defeated by them one by one. I told Tong Tong about the situation and reminded her to be careful. With Tong Tong's help, the pressure on the spirit snake and I would be greatly reduced. When the leader of the monster race saw that I had another helper, he waved his hand and mobilized everyone to surround us. How could I let him have his way? I gestured for Tong Tong and the spirit snake to pull apart the formation. Then, I stepped into the 9-star heavenly dipper. With every step, my aura increased. Immediately after, the Tao energy in my body continuously surged towards the armor-removing sword. As I took the last step, the armor-removing sword was filled with Tao energy. I raised the armor-removing sword up high and swung it at the monster race army that was surging towards us. The armor-removing sword shone brightly, and the sword energy charged towards their faces. Its speed seemed to be beyond their imagination. The attack made them feel the aura of death, causing them to stop in their tracks. Previously, they looked ferocious, but now their faces were filled with fear, and they seemed to be in a panic. Many of the monsters that hadn't caught up with us immediately turned and ran when they saw the terrifying attack. The monsters in front of us seemed to know that they couldn't dodge in time, so they tried to withstand the attack. They spat out grayish-white smoke from their mouth. The smoke seemed to be a barrier that enveloped their bodies. However, such a life-saving technique wasn't enough to withstand the sword energy of the armor-removing sword. Ultimately, they were too weak. The barrier was as fragile as a bubble under the might of the sword energy. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of monsters were killed by the sword energy. These were only small monsters that hadn't reached the Celestial Master realm. Killing them was as easy as chopping vegetables. At that moment, my gaze was fixed on the leader and the dozens of Celestial Master realm monsters behind him. They seemed to sense my gaze and turned to look at me. Their eyes were filled with rage, as though they wanted to tear me apart. I didn't directly face them. Even though the previous attack had easily killed dozens of monsters, it had consumed a large amount of my physical strength. I took off the jade bracelet and held it in my hand. As I absorbed the dragon energy from it, I channeled my Tao energy into the armor-removing sword. After a short while, my physical strength had recovered. I kept the jade bracelet and walked towards the leader of the monster race with my sword in hand. When that person saw me walking towards him, he didn't panic. He didn't seem to want to deal with me personally. Instead, he waved his hand and signaled for the Celestial Master realm monsters behind him to kill me. The monsters received the order and didn't hesitate as they charged towards me. I didn't dare to be careless. Even though they were only at the Celestial Master realm, there were more than 10 of them. I didn't have enough confidence to face so many Celestial Masters at once. The Snake Spirit and Tong Tong seemed to have sensed my situation. After clearing the surrounding monsters, they quickly rushed to my side to face the enemy together with me. The dozen Celestial Master realm monsters had an imposing aura. Their bodies emitted a faint green mist as they quickly reached me. Their fists emitted smoke as they aimed at my face. I didn't dare to face them head-on. My body flashed to avoid the attack. Then, I leaped a few meters backward to put some distance between me and them. Seeing that I had easily dodged their attacks, the monsters became even more enraged. Then, they chased after us. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of us and surrounded us. Since I was being attacked from both sides, I didn't dare to be careless. Since I had easily dodged their attack, the monsters didn't hurry to attack me. Instead, they observed me from head to toe. Their sneaky looks gave me goosebumps. I immediately took out a few fierce Yang talismans from my Xiang Lu bag and threw them at them. They didn't expect me to attack them. Before they could react, the fierce Yang talismans hit them. The flames produced by the fierce Yang talismans were Yang flames, which were extremely lethal to monsters and ghosts. Moreover, I was a Seal Heavenly Master, so the power of the fierce Yang talismans in my hands couldn't be underestimated. The fierce Yang talismans exploded on their bodies. Their bodies were burning with Yang flames. Their faces changed, but they didn't look panicked. Instead, they controlled the smoke on their bodies to surround the Yang flames, separating them from their bodies. Indeed, the Yang flames weren't dangerous to Heavenly Masters. After the 3 monsters had dealt with the Yang flames, their eyes met. Then, they nodded as if they had reached an agreement. Then, the 3 of them attacked me at the same time. They were really fast. Their fists covered in green smoke reached me in just a blink of an eye. However, my reaction wasn't slow. I raised the dismantling armor sword and parried their fist. The moment the fists touched the sword energy of the dismantling armor sword, I quickly retracted them. As the 3 monsters couldn't subdue me, They turned around and dashed toward the snake spirit and Tong Tong. At first, the snake spirit and Tong Tong were fighting two monsters at the same time. However, with the addition of the three monsters, they were quickly suppressed. I glanced at the snake spirit. Although he was facing three monsters, his body was as strong as a young god heavenly master's. I didn't need to worry about him getting hurt. On the other hand, Tong Tong didn't have a strong body like the snake spirit. He couldn't resist anymore. I hurried to raise the dismantling armor sword and dashed toward the monsters attacking Tong Tong. Those monsters had seen the power of the dismantling armor sword. When they saw me, they stopped attacking Tong Tong and turned around to deal with me. I gave Tong Tong a look, asking him to attack from the front and the back to kill those monsters. Tong Tong understood. He immediately wielded the whip made of energy and lashed at one of the monsters. The monster's attention was completely focused on me, so it wasn't on guard against my eyes. It only reacted when the black lightning whip hit its body. However, it didn't have enough time to dodge. The black whip had bound it tightly. I had already charged in front of him, and the armor-stripping sword in my hand fiercely slashed at his face. While it was defenseless, I killed the Heavenly Master Realm monster with one strike. This attack came too suddenly. The other three monsters didn't seem to be able to react, but from the looks of it, they should have been shocked by this attack. They wouldn't dare to attack in a short time. I seized the chance and sent my Tao energy into the dismantling armor sword. At the same time, my hand reached for the jade bracelet in front of my chest. Tong Tong and I did the same thing and killed the rest of the monsters. At this time, the snake spirit was still being attacked by the three monsters. However, it was fighting in the air, so the monsters couldn't gain the upper hand. It was also very difficult for the snake spirit to kill them. The two sides were in a deadlock, and it was hard to determine the winner. After I recovered, I joined the battle with Tong Tong. After a quarter of an hour, the last few monsters were killed by our joint efforts. I looked at the position of the monster leader, but I didn't see him. I didn't know when he had run away. Chapter 773. All the humans in the village had been killed by the monster race. I didn't plan to stay, so I left with Tong Tong and the snake spirit. We walked in the barbarian land for several months and met countless monster race members. Although we killed most of them, there were many experts who defeated us. I was forced to use the Xian Yuan sword to escape. In the past few months, the monster race had slaughtered countless humans, burning, killing, and plundering. It seemed that the war between humans and monsters wouldn't end in a short period of time. I stood at the top of the mountain and looked at the smoke rising from the foot of the mountain. I was filled with emotions. Closing my eyes, I could hear a heart-wrenching scream. I seemed to understand why Emperor Ku didn't hesitate to perish together with Monster Emperor Jun to destroy it. At that moment, a gust of wind blew. I subconsciously thought that the experts of the monster race had come to seek revenge, so I immediately bowed and got into a fighting stance. Unexpectedly, the gust of wind wrapped around my body, making me feel weak. I immediately lost consciousness. When I woke up, the surroundings were chaotic. I only realized that I had returned to the Spirit Lock Tower after I regained consciousness. I stood up and patted the dust off my body. It seemed that the 6th floor's mission was completed. I placed the prayer beads on my hand and followed the wall to find the entrance to the last floor. The 7th floor of the Spirit Lock Tower wasn't spacious, and there wasn't any chaotic aura in the surroundings. There were many oil lamps hanging on the surrounding walls, but they were all extinguished. Although it was very dim, it didn't affect my vision. There was a Buddha statue in the middle of the floor, which gave people a solemn and benevolent feeling. I had already guessed that the Spirit Lock Tower was worshipping Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. It seemed that this Buddha statue was the image of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. He was holding a magic staff and sitting on a lotus pedestal. His left hand was placed flat in front of his chest, as if he had been holding something. After thinking for a while, I remembered that Miao Ju had asked me to place the prayer beads back on the Buddha statue. It seemed that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had been holding the prayer beads. I quickly stepped forward and placed the prayer beads on Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's hand. Then, I slowly retreated and took out the Green Lantern Ancient Scroll from my Xianglu bag. Previously, Monk Miao Ju had said that this Spirit Lock Pagoda was the key to opening the Green Lantern Ancient Scroll. However, ever since I entered the Spirit Lock Pagoda, I have yet to open the Green Lantern Ancient Scroll. Since I had already returned the prayer beads, it was time to open the Ancient Scroll and take a look. Right when I was about to open the scroll, my surroundings suddenly became much brighter. I stopped what I was doing and looked around. The oil lamps that had been extinguished earlier were now burning again, illuminating the entire floor. I was surprised and didn't know what was going on. In the blink of an eye, the light in the building grew brighter. It was so bright that it hurt my eyes. After a long while, I slowly opened my eyes. The previously dull Buddha statue had now become resplendent and dazzling. I was puzzled. The Buddha statue had suddenly changed, and I didn't know if it was good or bad. After hesitating for a while, I decided to move a little farther away to see the situation inside the scroll of green lamp. Just as I was about to retreat, I heard an ethereal voice in front of me. "Benefactor, please wait." I was startled and looked around, but I didn't see anyone else on the floor. Could it be? I looked at the image of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and asked with a frown, "Is Bodhisattva calling me?" Buddhists said that seeing the true body of a Buddha was a great fortune, and it was an opportunity that could be cultivated for 10,000 generations. Could it be that I had obtained this fortune today? As soon as I said that, the dazzling Buddha statue spoke again. "I would like to have a chat with you. Is that okay?" It really was Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Although I wasn't a Buddhist disciple, Bodhisattva's appearance still surprised me. I paused and said, "Bodhisattva, please speak." Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva asked, "Do you know why we need to go to the Spirit Lock Tower to open the Scroll of Green Lamp?" The Scroll of Green Lamp and the reclining Buddha beads were related. Lu Ruxu had accidentally discovered it in Shenzhen. After thinking about it carefully, I didn't know the reason, so I went to the reclining Buddha temple. Later, with the guidance of Monk Miaojua, I went to the Spirit Lock Tower with the Buddhist bead. I experienced many things during the process, so I forgot about it. I didn't care about the reason, I just wanted to open the second part of the death scripture as soon as possible. However, hearing Bodhisattva's words, it seemed that this matter was quite important. Bodhisattva heard that I didn't know the details, so he told me the connection. According to him, the origin of the scroll of green lamp shouldn't be mentioned at this time. I didn't care about this. The first part of the death scripture was given to me by Lao Ai, so she must know its origin and use. If I wanted to know, she would tell me. However, what he said next gave me some thoughts. He said that one must have a kind heart to open the scroll of green lamp. The kind he mentioned was the kind of Buddhism, not the kind that ordinary people understood. Buddhism regarded peace, compassion, wisdom, and liberation as good for all living beings and oneself. My previous experience in the other 6 floors was the best proof. Although I killed the heavenly Yiksha in the first level, based on the process, I also used all my abilities. This is wisdom. On the 2nd floor, I released the twin Rakshasas, and on the 3rd floor, Wang Hai let go of his obsession. This was liberation. On the 4th floor, I experienced Yen Nanshan's life and realized that he had wanted to kill me because he was blinded by hatred. Thus, I let go of my resentment against him. This was compassion. On the 5th floor, because I couldn't find the exit, I fell into a desperate situation and almost lost my life. Fortunately, I kept my heart and could see the cause. This was peace. However, Bodhisattva didn't say anything about the 6th floor. He only said, "I will understand in the future." After listening to him, I suddenly understood. When I was in a desperate situation, I thought about Bodhisattva's intention. However, I didn't understand Buddhism well enough to realize it. In that case, I could open the scroll of green lamp now. Thinking about this, I opened the scroll of green lamp in my hand. The lamp on the scroll was already lit, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then, lines of small words appeared on the scroll, which were the same as the death scripture in the first part. I was surprised and thanked Bodhisattva. Then, I put the death scripture away. I didn't want to stay here any longer, so I asked Bodhisattva to leave. Just as I was about to leave, Bodhisattva called me. I have one more thing. Before I could reply, a picture scroll appeared in front of me. This picture scroll was illusory and appeared in the air. There were tall buildings on it, and some monsters with wings soared in the air. Their mouths were spitting fire, which burned the surrounding buildings. Under the tall buildings, there were many beasts with manes, holding a ball in their hands. Half of the ball was hairy, while the other half was bald. When I took a closer look, I found that it was a head. The picture scroll turned to a mountain forest. Although it was a mountain forest, the trees were all destroyed. Broken rocks and branches could be seen everywhere. I couldn't help but recall the scene in the barbarian land on the 6th floor. Could this picture scroll be recording what happened in the barbarian land? While I was thinking, the picture scroll suddenly disappeared, replaced by Bodhisattva's ethereal voice. You are fated with Buddhism. Today, I will give you half of a Buddha's heart. I hope that you will keep your heart and don't fall into the evil path. After saying that, an object emitting golden light appeared in my hand out of thin air. The golden light was so dazzling that I couldn't see the object's appearance clearly. I felt that its body was smooth and warm, giving me a refreshing feeling. When I thanked him again, Bodhisattva asked me to comprehend the half of the Buddha's heart in my hand before I could leave. I was puzzled as I didn't know Bodhisattva's intention. I was about to ask, but before I could, the oil lamps on the wall suddenly extinguished. It seemed Bodhisattva didn't want to talk to me anymore. Although I didn't know why he wanted me to refine the Buddha's heart here, his words must have a deeper meaning. I didn't need to guess. I couldn't help but think. I sat down and placed the Buddha's heart in front of me. I closed my eyes and began to comprehend. After a long time, I didn't feel anything strange in my body, and the Buddha's heart in front of me didn't make any sound. Seeing this, I began to ponder. Although I didn't know what this Buddha's heart was, I could guess that it was similar to the sarira that Buddhists often talked about. If I wanted to comprehend something from it, I would have to use Buddhist methods. However, besides reading the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture once, I didn't know any Buddhist technique. At this moment, a light flashed in my mind, and I had an answer. I immediately closed my eyes to clear my mind and began to read the Ksitigarbha original wish scripture. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was in the heavens of Kaili, preaching for his mother. At that time, all the Buddhas in the boundless world, including the great Bodhisattva Mahasattva, gathered together. Indeed, my body gradually gained some golden energy. This energy slowly flowed through my veins and eventually flowed to my heart. This feeling was like lying on the clouds, with a cool breeze brushing past my ears, making me feel very comfortable. While I was immersed in this comfortable feeling, a sudden gust of wind came from behind. I didn't have time to react, and my back was hit hard. Moreover, the force of this blow was so great that it loosened my heavenly veins. The Tao Qi in my body kept tumbling, as if it wanted to rush out of my body. I felt a sweetness in my chest, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. I suddenly opened my eyes and found that Monk Miao Ju had appeared in front of me. He was looking at me with a smile on his face, and the Buddha's heart that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had given me was also in his hand. In an instant, I understood that he was the one who launched a sneak attack on me, and his goal was to obtain this Buddha's heart. When I first met this monk Miao Ju, he only had the cultivation of glory of consciousness. Now, he was able to seriously injure me. Although he had the advantage of a sneak attack, he was at least at the Heavenly Seal Master realm. Chapter 774. Monk Miaojue squatted in front of me, his hands constantly rubbing the Buddha's heart. His expression was one of excitement and disbelief. He muttered to himself, "I've finally gotten it. It's been more than 1,000 years. It's been more than 1,000 years. I've been waiting for so long." More than 1,000 years? What does that mean? This old man has lived for more than 1,000 years? I didn't understand what he was saying, but it didn't matter. The most important thing right now was to seize the time to heal and restore my fighting strength. In my current state, if this monk Miaojue attacked me again, I wouldn't be able to withstand even one of his palms. I took a deep breath and calmed my mind. Taking advantage of the fact that Miaojue wasn't paying attention to me, I tried to stabilize the veins of the heaven and restore my cultivation. Unexpectedly, as soon as I closed my eyes, Monk Miaojue's cold laughter resounded. "Zhou-yi, do you think I'll give you time to heal? Obediently hand over the green lamp ancient scroll, and I'll consider letting you die a quick death." I snorted lightly. Miaojue and the monk had underestimated me. Although I was seriously injured, I wasn't at the end of my rope yet. I immediately summoned Tong Tong and the serpent spirit, signaling them to kill Monk Miaojue on the spot. Both of them were Yin souls, so their strength was somewhat limited in this place. However, Tong Tong's cultivation was close to that of a Yang spirit, and the serpent spirit wasn't far behind. With the two of them joining hands, it shouldn't be a problem to deal with Monk Miaojue. After receiving my order, the serpent spirit and Tong Tong immediately besieged Monk Miaojue. Seizing this opportunity, I placed my hand on the jade bracelet, and a large amount of dragon energy surged into my body. I guided the dragon energy to move around the veins of the heaven to repair the previously damaged parts. At the same time, I heard a dragon roar, but there was no other sound. I was delighted. It seemed that Tong Tong and the serpent spirit had killed Monk Miaojue. At this time, I could completely cast aside all distracting thoughts and focus on healing my injuries. Unexpectedly, Monk Miaojue's voice resounded again. "You scoundrels are no match for me." I was startled and opened my eyes to look. I saw Tong Tong and the serpent spirit lying on the ground, unconscious. I didn't know whether they were dead or alive. Miaojue, on the other hand, was completely unharmed and was walking towards the serpent spirit. Even Tong and the snake spirit were no match for Monk Miaojue. It seems that my previous speculation was wrong. This old guy has at least the cultivation of Yang spirit. Looking at his actions, it was obvious that he wanted to kill the snake spirit and Tong Tong. Although my injuries had yet to recover, I couldn't care less at this moment. I forcefully activated my Qi of the Wei and took out the Xianyuan sword from my mouth. Monk Miaojue sensed my movement and turned around. With just a glance, his eyes lit up and he clicked his tongue. "This is the Xianyuan sword? Good, you actually have such an ancient divine artifact. However, you are not qualified to use it, so it's better if you hand it over to me for safekeeping." Then, he took the prayer beads off his chest and threw them at me. I've seen this move before. He forced Chen Yangting, who was at the pinnacle of glorious past, to retreat with one strike. Although I'm a heavenly seal master, I was injured by his sneak attack, and my strength is far from what it used to be. If I were to take this attack, I'm afraid I won't be able to retaliate. The prayer beads were surrounded by a bright Buddha light. They spun in the air and were about to reach me. I didn't dare to take it head-on, but I had no other choice. I couldn't mobilize my Qi of the Wei, so I could only use the Xianyuan sword to block the attack. I hoped that this ancient divine artifact could withstand it. However, I had overestimated the Xianyuan sword. Although it was the leader of the ancient divine artifacts, it didn't have Qi of the Wei, so it was only slightly stronger than an ordinary magic weapon. It couldn't withstand this attack. When the prayer beads collided, I felt a tearing sensation in my chest. My body flew backward and fell hard on the ground. The Xianyuan sword also flew out of my hand. At this moment, I couldn't muster any strength in my body. I could only watch Monk Miao Ju approach me step by step. His steps were slow, but his eyes were full of murderous intent. There was no trace of Buddhist compassion. I finally understood that he had persuaded me to enter the Spirit Lock Pagoda for the sake of the Buddha's heart. He knew that he didn't have the kindness of Buddhism in his heart, so he couldn't pass the previous test. When I returned the prayer beads, he sneaked into the Spirit Lock Pagoda and launched a sneak attack when I was unprepared. Monk Miao Ju was really scheming. It was a pity that I had only sensed that there was something wrong with him. Moreover, he only had the cultivation of Shi Yao. That was why I left the fatty outside to watch over him. I didn't think that he would have such a scheme in his heart. Judging from his strength, it was likely that the fatty was already in a bad situation. I didn't want to put the fatty in danger with me, so I didn't bring him inside. Who would have thought that this decision would harm him? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but feel sad. I clenched my teeth and tried to stand up. However, I was seriously injured by the previous attack, and I didn't have any strength left. Monk Miao Ju quickly approached me again. This time, he didn't talk nonsense. He just grinned and pointed his finger at me. At this time, a black mist suddenly rose in the surroundings. Then, a short figure appeared between me and Monk Miao Ju. Sacrificial evil spirit. He suddenly appeared. Could it be that he had already recovered his cultivation? My throat moved. I wanted to call out to him, but the moment I opened my mouth, I felt a sweetness in my throat, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. He seemed to have sensed my movement as he turned to look at me and asked, "How are your injuries?" I waved my hand, indicating that it wasn't fatal. He nodded and turned to look at Monk Miao Ju again. Monk Miao Ju didn't move, but his eyes seemed to be pondering. After a long time, he spoke. "Who are you? Why do I feel a familiar aura from your body?" The sacrificial evil spirit slowly walked towards him. He didn't look angry, but his aura was much stronger than before. The sacrificial evil spirit said coldly as he walked, "You and I are from 9 underworlds. I was forced to heal my injuries and didn't stop you from doing what you did in 9 underworlds 1,000 years ago. I didn't think that you would dare to attack him today. You are courting death." After hearing that, Monk Miao Ju's body trembled. His eyes were filled with fear as he retreated. He stuttered, It's you." After saying that, Monk Miao Ju pointed at me, then looked at the sacrificial evil spirit and asked, "I have no grudges with you. Why do you want to protect him? He has many treasures on him. After killing him, you and I can divide them." This Monk Miao Ju really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He still wanted to kill me and take my treasures. He didn't even know where he got the confidence to say that in front of the sacrificial evil spirit. After hearing that, the sacrificial evil spirit's face turned gloomy. He said coldly, "You don't have the qualifications to know who he is. It's really ridiculous for an ant to dream of ascending to the heavens." After saying that, the sacrificial evil spirit disappeared and appeared in front of Monk Miao Ju in the blink of an eye. Monk Miao Ju didn't even have time to react before he died. His body went limp and fell to the ground. The sacrificial evil spirit didn't intend to stop there. The shaman energy in his hand surged and he slapped Monk Miao Ju's corpse. In an instant, the corpse turned into dust and dissipated in the air. After doing that, he turned around and pulled me up from the ground. He signaled me not to move. Then, he extended his hand and touched my back. I instantly felt a warm current gushing into my body, repairing all the meridians that had been previously shattered. Then, the warm current moved towards the vein of the heavens. After circulating a few times in the vein of the heavens, it calmed down. In less than half an hour, the vein of the heavens had completely recovered. I stood up and shook my body. Crackling sounds came from my body, giving me an indescribable feeling of comfort. My previous injuries had completely healed. I quickly went in front of the snake spirit and Tong Tong to check on their condition. They were currently unable to move. It was fortunate that they still had a breath left in them. It was just that they had been severely injured by Monk Miao Ju and had fainted. It was fortunate that the sacrificial evil spirit had appeared in time. Otherwise, the three of us wouldn't have been able to escape this calamity. If Tong Tong wanted to recover, she would have to enter the jade bracelet and the snake spirit would have to fly back to my back. However, the two of them were still unconscious due to their severe injuries. It would be difficult for them to wake up for a while. I looked at the sacrificial evil spirit. The method he used to repair my meridians was really powerful. It seemed that I could only ask him to help us. Before I could open my mouth, the sacrificial evil spirit nodded. He knew what I was thinking. Then, he squatted down and placed his hands on Tong Tong's body. After 3 to 5 minutes, Tong Tong slowly opened her eyes. At first, her eyes were blank. However, when she saw me, they regained their vigor. She anxiously asked about my injuries. I rubbed her head to show her that I was all right. I asked her to return to the jade bracelet to heal her wounds. She was bewildered and looked at the snake spirit with a worried face. I told her about the snake spirit situation and comforted her. Then, she felt reassured and returned to the jade bracelet. The next step was to wake up the snake spirit. The sacrificial evil spirit stood up and stared at the snake spirit. His face was solemn. I thought that something had happened to the snake spirit that made the sacrificial evil spirit feel troubled. After I asked him about it, he didn't reply. He just shook his head and used the previous method to wake up the snake spirit. As soon as the snake spirit woke up, he cursed Monk Miao Ju and coughed violently. I told him that Monk Miao Ju had been killed. Only then did he stop cursing and fly back to my back. From now on, the matter in the spirit sealing tower had come to an end. However, it was a pity that the other half of his Buddha's heart had perished together with Monk Miao Ju under the sacrificial evil spirit's palm. However, I didn't care too much about it. That thing was a Buddhist item, and I was a member of the celestial sect. That thing wasn't of much use to me. Now that I had lost it, it was heaven's will. At this moment, I was worried about the fatty. Although Monk Miao Ju hadn't mentioned him, I had prepared for the worst after witnessing his method. But if something bad happened to the fatty, how could I face Uncle Lin? I anxiously followed the sacrificial evil spirit out of the spirit sealing tower. As soon as I got outside, I saw a person lying not far from the entrance. His body was wrapped in a light yellow barrier. It was the fatty. I hurried forward to check on him. Unexpectedly, before I could get close to him, I was blocked by the barrier around him. Then, I realized that the fatty had seen through Monk Miao Ju's thoughts, and the two of them had fought. When the fatty was in danger, he hid in his formation. Although Monk Miao Ju was strong, the fatty's formation couldn't be underestimated. Monk Miao Ju couldn't kill the fatty, and he was worried about the situation inside the tower. As such, the fatty managed to escape. Chapter 775. I didn't know much about formations, but the fatty was an outstanding expert. After trying for a long time, I couldn't break the formation. I wanted to ask the evil spirit to break it, but I was worried that it would hurt the fatty. I had to give up. Feeling helpless, I could only stand outside the formation and call the fatty's name to wake him up. At first, he didn't react. After I called him a few more times, his fingers trembled. I was happy and continued to call him. Eventually, he slowly opened his eyes and looked at me. His mouth opened and closed as if he was saying something. However, he was so weak that he couldn't make a sound. Seeing him like this, I was worried. I asked him to open the formation so that I could save him. After listening to me, the fatty struggled to move to the side. He reached his hand to a place where there were seashells, grabbing them and retrieving them. In the blink of an eye, the barrier around the fatty disappeared. I hurried to him. I didn't dare to touch him as I was afraid that I would worsen his injuries. I wanted to ask him about his condition so that I could save him. However, he fainted before I could ask him anything. I was worried and turned to look at the evil spirit. At this moment, he was the only one who could save the fatty. The evil spirit signaled me to calm down. He placed his hand on the fatty's chest. After a few seconds, he stopped and said, "His veins in the sky are damaged. I can only save his life. I can't help him recover completely." His words surprised me. My veins were broken in many places, and my veins in the sky were damaged. He only used an hour to make me fully recover. Why can't he do the same when it comes to Fatty? I furrowed my brows and asked, why? The evil spirit told me that my bloodline was special, and my body had a kind of energy that could automatically repair the damaged veins in a critical moment. When he helped me heal, he only played a guiding role and sped up the speed of my recovery. The evil spirit's words reminded me of the time when the heavenly master of the Lu family had destroyed my cultivation base. My veins were all broken, and I had to rely on the true dragon saliva I got from the Metaphysics Society to repair them. It seemed that was the strange energy he was talking about. However, I had only found one drop of true dragon saliva after so many years. It was really hard to find. It seemed that Fatty wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. He could only think of another way. After Fatty was saved by the evil sacrificial spirit, he only looked at him and did not ask when the evil sacrificial spirit had returned. I told the Fatty what had happened in the spirit lock tower. Then, I asked him how Miaojua had injured him. What he said was not far from what I had guessed. According to Fatty, they had been waiting here for a few days, but I hadn't come out. In the end, he became worried and prepared to enter the tower to look for me. Unexpectedly, he was stopped by Monk Miaoju, who said that only one person could enter the Spirit Lock Pagoda at a time. Otherwise, the pagoda would be destroyed and he would die. When Fatty heard this, although he was anxious, he suppressed the urge to enter the pagoda. When the Buddhist light at the top of the Spirit Lock Pagoda lit up, Miaoju's face lit up and he was about to enter the pagoda. Fatty also tried to keep up, but at this time, Miaoju suddenly turned around and attacked Fatty. Just like me, he thought that Monk Miaoju only had the cultivation base of glory of consciousness. Therefore, he only stared at Monk Miaoju's movements and did not put up his guard. That was why he was injured. Fatty then reacted. He knew that if Monk Miaoju entered the Spirit Lock Pagoda, he would definitely deal with me. Therefore, he decided to risk his life to stop Monk Miaoju. However, the difference in strength between the two of them was too big. Fatty was unable to block Miaoju's attack. After a short while, his meridians were shattered by Miaoju. In the end, he was forced to use his sect's secret array, which prevented Monk Miaoju from succeeding. Fortunately, he managed to keep his life, but Fatty was also an arrow at the end of its flight. When he saw Miaoju enter the Spirit Lock Pagoda, he was both angry and anxious. He immediately fainted in the array. After listening to Fatty's words, I patted his shoulder and helped him up. I told him that I would find a way to solve the problem of his meridians, so that he wouldn't be overly worried. Although Fatty had an optimistic personality, after understanding his injuries, his complexion turned pale. After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth and said to me, "Third child, I want to return to my sect. My master will definitely have a way." I didn't know if Fatty didn't want to trouble me, but after hearing his determination, I hesitated for a moment before nodding and leaving the camp. Although Fatty was seriously injured, he was only unable to use his cultivation base. His movements were still the same as a normal person. Thus, after leaving Crouching Buddha Temple, he separated from us and returned to his sect. The sacrificial evil spirit and I had to go to Mount Lao. After all, I had previously promised the sect master of Mount Lao that I would send the Eastern Emperor Bell over. However, after leaving Billows Mountain, I had wholeheartedly wanted to save little Wang Li, so this matter was delayed. Qingdao wasn't too far from Beijing, and it was only a 10-hour drive. Along the way, I had nothing to do, so I asked the sacrificial evil spirit why he had suddenly appeared in the Spirit Lock Pagoda. He told me that the Spirit Lock Pagoda was originally built on the gap between the 9 underworlds and the human world. I had heard about this from Wang Hai before, so I didn't pay much attention to it. The reason why he had appeared in time was because someone had told him about my situation. I found it strange and asked him who it was. The sacrificial evil spirit said 2 words, Xitigarbha. The sacrificial evil spirit was different from me. I was a contemporary person. Although I had the dual identity of Emperor Ku and Monster Emperor Jun, I still had a trace of respect for the Almighty Buddhist. But the sacrificial evil spirit was different. He was the famous god of war Chiyu. Buddhism was an external force, and in terms of seniority, it wasn't enough for the sacrificial evil spirit to lower his status and call Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. However, I was curious as to why Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had done this. If he had known that I would be in danger, why had he left so hurriedly? The sacrificial evil spirit told me the details. The Bodhisattva's voice that I had heard in the Spirit Lock Pagoda was just a message from him in the 9 underworld. He had made a great vow that he wouldn't become a Buddha until hell was empty, so he couldn't leave the 9 underworlds as he pleased. However, he knew that I was in danger, and he knew the relationship between my identity and the sacrificial evil spirit. The sacrificial evil spirit happened to be in the 9 underworlds, so he told him about it. At that time, the sacrificial evil spirit was recovering his power. When he heard the news, he immediately stopped and rushed to the Spirit Lock Pagoda to save me. After listening to him, I was a little moved. I should have thanked him, but due to our relationship, I didn't say it out loud. I just asked him how his power was recovering. The answer I got was only 70% of the power he had when he was at his peak. But his face was calm, as if he didn't care about it. I thought about how he had killed Monk Miao Ju with just 1 strike. That kind of method was really admirable. Although Monk Miao Ju wasn't weak, he hadn't reached the Yang God's celestial master realm. If he hadn't sneak attacked me and damaged my heavenly veins, I would have been able to fight him. The sacrificial evil spirit could kill a celestial master with just 1 strike, and that was only 70% of his power. If he were to fully recover, his power would be unimaginable. The mention of Monk Miao Ju reminded me of their previous conversation. From what the sacrificial evil spirit had said, Monk Miao Ju seemed to have come from the 9 underworlds. However, I didn't know why he had become a monk in the Crouching Buddha Temple. Since I was bored in the carriage, I asked the sacrificial evil spirit about it. He didn't hide anything from me, so he told me the whole story. More than 1,000 years ago, the sacrificial evil spirit was still in the 9 underworld. He had been seriously injured, and it took him several thousand years to recover. Coincidentally, a powerful Een soul came to the 9 underworlds at that time. As soon as the Een soul arrived in the 9 underworlds, it started to devour the weaker Een souls. However, the sacrificial evil spirit was too powerful, so it didn't dare to provoke him. The sacrificial evil spirit didn't care about this matter. It just wanted to heal its wound. As the Een soul saw that the sacrificial evil spirit didn't pay attention to it, it became more reckless. After devouring a large number of Een souls, its power skyrocketed. It broke through the barrier of the 9 underworlds and escaped to the human world. After listening to this part, I remembered what the twin Rakshasas had told me. At first, I thought that the Een soul was the sacrificial evil spirit, but later on, I found out that it was someone else. It seemed that monk Miao Ju was that een soul. After the sacrificial evil spirit killed monk Miao Ju, it interrogated his soul and learned the truth. According to him, after the een soul had escaped from the 9 underworlds, it relied on its power and started to slaughter people in the human world. However, it didn't expect to meet a monk. After a fierce battle with the een soul, the monk captured it and destroyed its cultivation base. The een soul thought that it couldn't escape death, but the monk gave it a good fortune. He asked it to convert to Buddhism, and from then on, it would comprehend the Buddha's way. Once it comprehended the Buddha's heart, it would be able to achieve enlightenment. Under the pressure of the monk, the een soul had no choice but to agree. It thought that after the monk had achieved enlightenment, it would find the monk to settle its grudge. However, it didn't expect that it would wait for 1,000 years. When it learned that the Spirit Lock Pagoda in the Crouching Buddha Temple could help it increase its cultivation base, it entered the Spirit Lock Pagoda. However, it didn't expect that after entering, it would almost die. However, it didn't stop there. It decided to become a preaching master in the Crouching Buddha Temple. While cultivating, it thought of a solution. It wasn't until I appeared that he had an idea. Since we had formed a good relationship, he wanted me to enter the pagoda on his behalf. However, after learning about the connection between the Green Lamp Scroll and the Spirit Lock Pagoda, he had a premeditated plan. Then, he tried to trick me into entering the Spirit Lock Pagoda. At first, he thought that as long as I reached the top, the Buddha's light would appear, and he would obtain profound dharma to help him achieve enlightenment. However, he didn't expect that in the end, there was no dharma at all. Instead, it was the Bodhisattva who gave me half of the Buddha's heart. This Buddha's heart seemed to be something more precious than the dharma. Thus, when I was unprepared, he ambushed and injured me, trying to snatch the Green Lamp Scroll and half of the Buddha's heart. From then on, I finally understood the ins and outs of the entire matter. This monk, Miao Ju, was really scheming. However, there was still something I couldn't understand. Why did he choose me? How did he know that I could pass the Spirit Lock Pagoda? Moreover, this trip to the Spirit Lock Pagoda seemed to be arranged by Miao Ju. However, I had a feeling that the Spirit Lock Pagoda was waiting for me. Chapter 776. When we arrived at Tsingtao, it was already late at night. I took the evil sacrificial spirit to a hotel not far from Mount Lao. I planned to go to the mountain early the next morning. It was a quiet night. When we arrived at the foot of Mount Lao the next day, we saw a notice saying that some facilities in Mount Lao's scenic area were being repaired and would be closed for 1 month. It was a common thing for scenic areas to be repaired, so I kept it in mind. Moreover, we weren't here for a vacation, so we wouldn't go to the scenic area. I took the evil sacrificial spirit and followed the path that Lu Zongqing had taken us to the Supreme Purity Palace. Along the way, we didn't meet anyone from Mount Lao, which made me a little puzzled. Although most of the people on Mount Lao were reclusive cultivators, we were close to the hinterland. Why didn't I see anyone? We were about to reach the Supreme Purity Palace. I remembered that the last time I came here, there were many Taoist priests in blue clothes working in the field. This time, I didn't see them, and there were no guards at the foot of the mountain. It was strange. With doubts in my heart, I went to the Supreme Purity Palace. This time, I finally saw people from Mount Lao. The gate of the Supreme Purity Palace was still closed, and 2 Taoists in blue clothes stood at the gate. They looked familiar, as if they were the 2 from last time. I walked forward and cupped my hands to greet them. Taoist elders, I'm here to visit the sect master of your sect. Please inform him of my arrival. After listening to me, the 2 Taoists were shaken. They looked at each other, their faces dark. One of them said coldly, "Wait a minute. We'll go in and inform him." This Taoist's behavior was strange, and I didn't know why. The last time I came, this Taoist was very respectful to me. Why was he so cold this time? I couldn't figure out the reason. A moment later, the gate of the Supreme Purity Palace opened, and a Taoist priest in his 50s walked out. He was dressed in white and looked hale and hearty, with the demeanor of an immortal. I had never seen this person before. I recalled the conversation I had with Lu Zongqing. From his age, he should have a high position in Mount Lao. The most important thing was that this person exuded a strong aura that I couldn't see through his cultivation base. However, I was sure that this person wasn't the sect master I had talked to last time. I could tell the difference between them. However, since it wasn't the sect master, it had to be an elder of Mount Lao. It seemed that this person should be one of the two Yang God Heavenly Master Realm senior brothers that Lu Zongqing had mentioned. Since he was an elder of Mount Lao, he had to show basic courtesy to him. I cupped my hands towards him and said, "I am Zhou Yi. Today, I have specially come to pay a visit to your sect's sect master." After hearing my name, the man's eyes narrowed and he asked, "You are Zhou Yi? How bold of you to actually take the initiative to deliver yourself to our doorstep." His words made me feel a little incredulous. I was obviously here to deliver the Eastern Emperor Bell, so why did he treat me so coldly? Listening to his words, it was as if I had done something wrong on Mount Lao. I was puzzled and immediately asked, "I don't know why Elder would say such a thing. I have come here today to complete the task that your sect master has entrusted me with." Hearing this, the man snorted lightly, his expression darkening as he replied, "You still dare to mention my master? Since you've come today, then leave your life behind." As soon as he finished speaking, his Tao Qi surged, displaying the might of a Yang Divine Celestial Master. Before I could react, he had already grabbed my neck with one hand and lifted me up. The Yang Divine Celestial Master's methods were indeed powerful, but he had only captured me when I was unprepared. If we were to fight, I would still be able to put up a fight. Under the Yang Divine Celestial Master's methods, the Tao Qi in my heavenly veins could not be used at all, and my body was completely powerless. The man's strength in his hand increased, and I could no longer breathe. At this moment, the sacrificial evil spirit beside me suddenly moved. His hand was wrapped in shaman qi, and he slapped the man's body. Perhaps the Taoist priest did not expect that the sacrificial evil spirit would suddenly make a move, nor did he expect that he would have such strength. He was actually sent flying by the slap and fell heavily on the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned pale. The two Taoists standing behind him quickly helped him up and looked at the sacrificial evil spirit together, their eyes filled with astonishment. They did not expect that as an elder of Mount Lao, a Yang Divine Celestial Master, he would be sent flying by the sacrificial evil spirit with one slap. Not to mention them, even I did not expect that the sacrificial evil spirit would be so strong. Previously, in the Spirit Lock Pagoda, he killed Monk Miao Ju with one move. At that time, I thought that the sacrificial evil spirit's cultivation was at the En God realm, which was the Yang Divine Celestial Master's realm. After all, there was an insurmountable gap between the Yang Divine Celestial Master and the Seal Heavenly Master. It was not strange that the sacrificial evil spirit could kill Monk Miao Ju with one move. However, I did not expect that he could injure the Yang Divine Celestial Master with one move. His strength was terrifying. I crouched in the distance and took deep breaths. The sacrificial evil spirit slowly walked toward the Taoist priest and coldly said, "You want to kill him? You're really daring." The Taoist priest knew the sacrificial evil spirit's strength and knew that he was not its match. He retreated and stammered, "You don't come here." The aura of death was getting closer to him. Perhaps he knew that he could not escape today, so he wanted to risk his life to fight the sacrificial evil spirit. However, the gap between their strengths was too big. Before he could attack, the sacrificial evil spirit had already arrived in front of him, grabbed his neck, and lifted him up. I immediately called the sacrificial evil spirit and asked him to put the Taoist priest down. If I didn't stop him in time, the Taoist priest would have died in the next second. Normally, it was not a big deal to kill him since he had treated me that way. However, I just came here to return the Eastern Emperor bell. I didn't want to cause any trouble. Moreover, we were currently on Mount Lao, which was a holy land for cultivators. It had existed for thousands of years and had a profound foundation. It should have a protective formation like Mount Longhu. If the sacrificial evil spirit killed him, Mount Lao would launch a crazy counterattack. At that time, it would be a desperate situation. Although the sacrificial evil spirit was strong and I could fight against the Yang Divine Celestial Master, if he activated the protective formation, I was afraid it would be a different situation. Moreover, what he had said earlier was a little unimaginable, and I wanted to find out the reason from his mouth. After hearing my words, the sacrificial evil spirit didn't hesitate. He loosened his grip and threw the Taoist priest to the ground. I slowly walked toward him. The sacrificial evil spirit quietly retreated to my side and stared at the flustered Taoist priest. I didn't want to talk nonsense with him and directly asked him what he meant. This time, he wasn't arrogant anymore and told me the reason. It turned out that when the Laozhan sect master was in seclusion, his disciples were guarding outside his door to prevent anyone from disturbing him. Besides talking to me, the sect master didn't talk to anyone else. Not long after I left Mount Lao, the sect master's aura disappeared. The disciples were worried about the sect master, so they went to check. Unexpectedly, the sect master was dead and his 3 souls were gone. They thought that the sect master had died at the critical moment of his seclusion. However, there were obvious wounds on his body, which meant that someone had killed him. It was obvious that I was the first person they thought of because I was the only one who had come in contact with the sect master. Thus, they sent their disciples everywhere to search for me. Later on, they found out that I had appeared at the Langya platform, so they hurried there. However, they didn't find me there. Speaking of this, I recalled that when I was preparing to go out to sea at the Langya platform, I had sensed the fluctuation of Taoist energy there. I thought that the Metaphysics Society had found out about the changes in the underground palace and sent people to investigate. I didn't expect that it was the people from Mount Lao. After their fruitless search, they didn't want to give up. They searched the entire Qingdao but couldn't find any traces of me. In the end, they could only return resentfully. They didn't expect that I would return to Mount Lao after a month. That was why the incident just now happened. After listening to him, I was silent for a while as I started to ponder. It was obvious that someone wanted to frame me. I had made too many enemies in the Xian and Taoist sects, so I couldn't determine who the murderer was. However, since he could kill the sect master of Mount Lao without attracting the attention of the people from Mount Lao, that person's power was terrifying. However, I didn't know what his intentions were. Did he want to use Mount Lao to eliminate me? Since he could easily kill the sect master of Mount Lao, why did he need to do so? After thinking for a long time, I couldn't figure out the reason. I had to explain this matter. I didn't kill him, so I naturally wouldn't admit it. However, since I was involved in this matter, I had to investigate this matter to clear the name of the sect master of Mount Lao and also give myself justice. Moreover, if I didn't explain this matter clearly today, I was afraid that even if I found the murderer in the future, they wouldn't believe me. I stood in front of the Taoist priest and faintly said, "This matter wasn't done by me. I didn't want to kill the sect master, nor do I have the power to do so." He clearly didn't believe me. He pointed at the evil sacrificial spirit and looked at me. "You don't have the power, but he does." I shook my head and replied, "It doesn't matter if you believe me or not, this matter wasn't done by us. However, don't worry, I will investigate the death of the sect master." Then, I let the evil sacrificial spirit carry him into the Tai Ching palace. Once we entered the palace, Many Taoist priests rushed out of the courtyard and surrounded us. It seemed that the 2 young Taoist priests that had escaped earlier had come back to report. A few people wearing white Taoist robes walked out of the crowd. I also saw Lu Zongqing among them. They must be the elders of Mount Lao. However, Lu Zongqing just glanced at me and then looked elsewhere, which made me feel strange. At this moment, a white-clothed Taoist priest said, "Evildoer, you killed my master and injured my junior brother. Today, my Mount Lao will not rest until you are dead." Then, the Taoist priest disappeared from his spot. With the evil sacrificial spirit here, I naturally didn't need to do anything. I retreated a few steps and heard a muffled groan. Before the Taoist priest could reach me, he was hit by something the evil sacrificial spirit had thrown out. The force of the blow pushed the Taoist priest back. Chapter 777. The Taoist priest also saw his junior brother on top of him, unable to move. He hurried to pick him up and glared at us with hatred. He ordered the azure-clothed Taoists to carry his junior brother back to the Supreme Purity Palace. Then, he shouted, "Disciples of Mount Lao, listen to my order. Follow me to kill this demon to comfort the sect master's soul in heaven." Then, he took the lead and dashed toward us. The evil sacrificial spirit moved his feet to meet him. The 2 of them were so fast that we couldn't see their movements clearly. 3 to 5 seconds later, the Taoist priest fell to the ground and spurted a mouthful of blood. His face was deathly pale. Meanwhile, the evil sacrificial spirit looked indifferent and didn't have a scratch on his body. Seeing that the evil sacrificial spirit was so powerful, the Taoist priest struggled to get up and roared, "Activate the grand formation to kill the demon." My heart sank. Mount Lao really had a grand formation to protect it. Although I have never seen Mount Lao's protective array, I can imagine how terrifying it is. Mount Lao had been passed down for 1,000 years and hadn't declined for a long time. The grand formation's contributions couldn't go unnoticed. If we were trapped inside, we wouldn't be able to escape. Just as I was about to signal the evil sacrificial spirit to retreat, Lu Zongqing stood up and stopped the Taoist priest. "Eldest brother, you can't. The grand formation can only be activated when Mount Lao is on the brink of life and death. It's not a critical moment, so we can't activate it." The Taoist priest was agitated. After coughing, he said, "Isn't it a critical moment? The person next to that demon is stronger than us. We can't kill him without the grand formation." Lu Zongqing was anxious. He glanced at me and then pulled the Taoist priest's sleeve, whispering something in his ear. With my heavenly seal master's power, I could hear them clearly no matter how low their voices were. According to Lu Zongqing, once the grand formation was activated, the spiritual energy in Mount Lao wouldn't be able to recover within 100 years. If that happened, all the disciples of Mount Lao would have a hard time increasing their realms. With just the few of us, we wouldn't be able to protect this 1,000-year foundation. After listening to Lu Zongqing, the Taoist priest hesitated for a while and eventually gave up on activating the grand formation. However, he didn't want to stop. He didn't attack the evil sacrificial spirit and charged at me. The evil sacrificial spirit moved and knocked him to the ground again. At this time, he no longer had the strength to stand up. Fortunately, I had warned the sacrificial evil spirit not to harm their lives. Otherwise, he would have been dead already. It's just that I didn't expect things to be like this today. Although they wanted to kill me, I didn't want to become enemies with Lao Mountain out of respect for the sect master. However, I still had to explain myself. I stood where I was and looked around at the surrounding disciples of Laoshan Mountain. I, Zhou Yi, came here today to complete the task entrusted to me by the headmaster. I have no intention of becoming enemies with Laoshan Mountain. To tell you the truth, I only found out about the death of the sect master earlier. This matter was not caused by me. Although I, Zhou, am not a saint, I am upright and upright. I will never agree to anything that is not my doing." After I said that, the crowd was still very quiet. It was obvious that they didn't believe me. I wasn't in a hurry and continued. "Back then, the headmaster invited me to Mount Lao and asked me to help Mount Lao find an ancient divine artifact, the Eastern Emperor Bell, to repair the restrictions on Mount Lao. Today, I came here to complete the task." With that, I took out the Eastern Emperor Bell from the Shangliu pouch and walked towards Lu Zongqing, handing him the Eastern Emperor Bell. Previously, when I heard that the headmaster had died, I was still somewhat hesitant. However, given the current situation, if I didn't hand over the Eastern Emperor Bell, I'm afraid that Mount Lao would really not rest until I was dead. Although I had an expert like the sacrificial evil spirit by my side and wasn't afraid of anything, I ultimately didn't want to make too many enemies. After Lu Zongqing received the Eastern Emperor Bell, he carefully examined it. Although he hadn't seen the true appearance of the Eastern Emperor Bell, he might have learned about it from ancient records. After he examined it, his hands trembled slightly. His face was filled with surprise and joy as he shouted, It really is the Eastern Emperor Bell." As soon as he said that, the crowd went into an uproar. The Eastern Emperor Bell was an ancient divine artifact that no one had seen for thousands of years. It was normal for the Taoist priests of Mount Lao to be so shocked. Lu Zongqing passed the Eastern Emperor Bell to his first senior brother and whispered, "First senior brother, what he said might be true. If he really killed our master, why would he return to Mount Lao and return the Eastern Emperor Bell? From what I see, the murderer is someone else." After hearing Lu Zongqing's words, the Taoist priest's hands continuously rubbed the Eastern Emperor Bell. After a long time, he nodded slightly and walked towards me, asking, "Can you tell me what you talked about with our master that day?" Seeing that he had relented, I didn't put on any airs. There was no need to hide this matter, so I told him what we talked about that day. I also emphasized that I was only in the headmaster's butterfly dream and didn't see him in person. After hearing my words, the Taoist priest fell into deep thought and didn't move for a long time. At this moment, Lu Zongqing walked over and said to the Taoist priest, "Senior, I think he wasn't lying. That day you were guarding Master's door. If there was anything strange inside, you should have sensed it. Moreover, I personally sent him down the mountain that day. Master was killed not long after he left the mountain, so the timing doesn't match." Lu Zongqing's words weren't false, and his reasoning was very clear. However, when he mentioned sending me down the mountain, it made me recall the situation that day. I clearly remembered that day when he welcomed me up the mountain. His attitude was respectful, but when he left the mountain, he was in a hurry. There must be a reason for this. However, it was better not to mention this matter at this time. When there was a chance, I would ask him face to face. After hearing Lu Zongqing's words, the Taoist priest nodded, but didn't confess to me. It seemed that he was still brooding over the matter of the evil spirit sacrificing him. I didn't care about this, after all. He was a young god celestial master, and had his own pride. I wasn't in a hurry to leave, so I told Lu Zongqing that I wanted to pay my respects to the headmaster. He couldn't make a decision at the moment, so after asking his senior, he agreed. Although I had never met the headmaster and the previous matter was only a transaction between us, I had a rough understanding of him. However, after our last conversation, I had a general understanding of him. Although he was the headmaster, he was a kind person and didn't put on any airs. To me, he was an elder that I should respect. Lu Zongqing led me to the ancestral hall on Mount Lao, where the memorial tablets and ashes of the previous headmasters were placed. The one at the bottom was the memorial tablet of the recently deceased headmaster. I received the yellow incense from Lu Zongqing and bowed to the headmaster's memorial tablet. Then, I walked forward and placed the yellow incense stick on the incense table. At this moment, I felt a familiar aura from the headmaster's ashes. This aura was very weak, and if I didn't pay attention, I would have overlooked it. Those Taoist priests had insisted that I had killed the headmaster, but it seemed they hadn't noticed this aura. It wasn't surprising. Their master had died, and they were anxious to find the murderer. It was normal that they had overlooked this aura. Even I had to be very careful and confirm it several times before I could feel its existence. This aura must have been left by the murderer, but how could a powerful person like him have made such a careless mistake? The evil spirit saw that I was standing still and didn't move, so he walked forward to ask. However, as soon as he was about to speak, his face changed. It seemed he had also sensed the aura. I shook my head at him, signaling him to keep quiet. This matter was much more complicated than I had imagined. If we told others about this, I was afraid we wouldn't be able to leave Mount Lao for a while. The evil spirit seemed to understand me. He gently touched the aura with his finger and dispersed it. We then followed Lu Zongqing out of the ancestral hall. After we got out, I pulled Lu Zongqing to a corner and asked him why he had acted that way when he sent me down the mountain. He stammered for a long time but didn't want to talk. Eventually, under the pressure of the evil spirit, he said, "At that time, my master sent me a voice transmission. He told me to do that." I frowned when I heard this. Then, I asked him if he knew why the headmaster had done that. He told me that the headmaster didn't tell me the reason. After paying my respects to the headmaster, I didn't linger on Mount Lao. I took the evil spirit and went back to the hotel. Along the way, I kept thinking about what Lu Zongqing had told me. I didn't know why the headmaster had done that. Did he know that he was in danger? That was why he had asked me to go down the mountain to avoid any misunderstandings? It doesn't seem unreasonable to think that way. Previously, when I was worshipping the headmaster, I found a very familiar aura in his urn. That aura is very similar to the witchcraft aura on my body, but there are also subtle differences. After returning to the hotel, I talked to the evil spirit about this matter. When I told him that the aura was similar to shaman energy, I got his confirmation. According to him, shaman energy wasn't the same as Tao energy. Although shaman energy was more or less the same, due to the different bloodlines there were some subtle differences. If that was the case, the headmaster might have known that someone from the shaman tribe would come to kill him. To prevent others from thinking that I was the culprit, he had sent me down the mountain in a hurry. Thinking about this, I asked the evil spirit how many people from the shaman tribe were still alive. After listening to me, he didn't answer immediately. After thinking for a while, he said, "I don't know, but apart from you and me, I've only seen one person." I immediately understood. He was talking about the fat man's martial uncle, Nangong. Apart from me and the evil spirit, the only person I had seen who cultivated shaman energy was Nangong. However, I knew Nangong's strength. Back in the Inshu royal tomb, he only had the cultivation of a young god celestial master. Although I didn't know what the headmaster's cultivation was, he had 2 disciples that had the cultivation of a young god celestial master. That meant that his cultivation was at least at the peak of a young god celestial master. Logically speaking, with Nangong's strength, it was impossible for him to kill the headmaster so easily. After thinking for a while, combined with the situation described by Lu Zongqing's second senior martial brother, the headmaster was most likely willing to be killed by Nangong. Otherwise, there would have been no traces of fighting. Chapter 778. According to my understanding of Nangong, there shouldn't be any grudge between him and the Laozhan sect's master. Thus, it was possible that his actions were related to the shaman tribe. However, it was just my speculation. If I wanted to know the whole story, I had to find Nangong. I told the evil spirit about my thoughts and told him that I wanted to find Nangong. The evil sacrificial spirit nodded noncommittally and didn't say anything. Nangong had always been secretive, and I didn't know where he was right now. However, since he was the fatty's martial uncle, perhaps he could get some information from the Zhanyan sect. I called the fatty, but I couldn't get through. Perhaps it was because he broke his phone when he was fighting with Miaojue. However, the fatty still had the sound-transmitting talisman I had given him. I should be able to contact him with it. I took out the talisman and asked if Nangong was on the mountain. Also, I wanted to know how his wounds were. However, even after a long time, I didn't get a reply. Did he lose his sound-transmitting talisman? Or was his wound so bad that he couldn't sense the sound-transmitting talisman? I couldn't help but worry about the fatty. I decided to go to Mount Huangguanshan overnight. Qingdao wasn't far from Mount Huangguanshan, the fatty's teacher. Along the way, I tried to use the sound-transmitting talisman to contact the fatty, but I didn't get a reply. I was worried and urged the driver to hurry up. However, it took us around 10 hours to reach the foot of Mount Huangguanshan. It was early in the morning, and the entire Mount Huangguanshan was shrouded in white mist. As soon as the evil spirit and I got out of the car, we hurried to go up the mountain. After taking 2 steps, we saw a man standing in front of us. When I got closer, I recognized that it was the fatty. Seeing that the fatty was safe and sound, the stone in my heart finally fell to the ground. I went to greet him. "Why didn't you reply to my message?" He scratched his head and explained. "His phone and the sound-transmitting talisman are broken. That's why he couldn't receive my message. However, his teacher told him that I would come today, so he asked him to wait for me at the foot of the mountain. From what he said, it seemed his teacher had performed a divination for me." Jinren Guan wasn't a person who performed divination casually. Was it because of something important? I asked the fatty, but he shook his head. "I don't know." I put this matter aside for the time being and asked about the fatty's injuries. After listening to me, he wore a heavy face and didn't answer me. Looking at him, I could roughly guess what had happened. It seemed the fatty's injury was more serious than I had imagined. I was afraid that it would affect the fatty's mood, so I didn't mention it again. Then, he asked if Nangong Ku was on the mountain. The fatty didn't ask me why I was looking for him. He just said that his martial uncle's whereabouts were erratic. He hadn't seen him since he came back. He wasn't sure if he was in the mountain or not. I nodded and didn't reply. Since the fatty didn't know, I could ask Master Guan later. After talking with the fatty, we arrived at Tianyi Temple. The fatty told me to go to the main hall by myself, saying that his master was waiting for me there. He seemed to have something to do, so he left. I've been here before, so I'm not unfamiliar with the surrounding buildings. I brought the evil sacrificial spirit to the main hall the fatty had mentioned. An old man in a plain robe was sitting in the main hall with his eyes closed. This old man was the fatty's master, Master Guan. I stood in front of the door and tidied up my clothes. Then, I bowed toward the room and said, "Junior Zhou Yi greets Master Guan." When Master Guan heard my voice, he slowly opened his eyes and signaled me not to stand on ceremony. "Let's go inside and have a chat." He asked us to take a seat and ordered a disciple to serve us tea. After taking a sip of tea, I didn't exchange pleasantries with him and directly asked about Nangong's whereabouts. After getting a negative answer from Master Guan, I didn't feel disappointed. This time, I just wanted to try my luck. My main goal was to worry about the fatty's injury. When he heard me mention the fatty's injury, his expression became serious. It seemed that it was the same as what I had expected. He cupped his hands toward me and said, "I'll have to trouble nephew Zhou about my poor disciple." When I saw him being so courteous, I was startled and quickly asked for the reason. Master Guan sighed. After a long time, he explained, "To tell you the truth, my poor disciple's injury is quite serious. Not only is it a problem with his tendons and veins, but his heaven's veins are also broken. If nephew Zhou hadn't come this time, this old man would have gone to look for you." When I heard his words, I frowned. I thought that the fatty's tendons and veins were broken and that the long journey back from Beijing had aggravated his injury. I didn't expect his condition to be so serious. However, from Master Guan's words, it seemed that I had to help him. Could it be that even he didn't have a way to solve this problem? How could I help him? If the fatty's tendons and veins were only broken, I could find the saliva of the real dragon in Wangwu Mountain. However, his heaven's veins were broken. I was afraid that the saliva of the real dragon wouldn't be able to heal his injury. Master Guan seemed to have seen through my doubts. He gently stroked his beard and explained, "If my poor disciple's heaven's veins can't be restored within 2 years, I'm afraid that he won't be able to continue cultivating for the rest of his life. It's a pity that this old man's cultivation isn't high enough. I can only help him stabilize his injury for the time being. However, I can't guarantee that something unexpected will happen in the long run. However, if I can find the monster core, perhaps my poor disciple can still be saved." Speaking of the monster core, this was the first time I had heard of it. However, it seemed to be related to the monster race. If that was the case, I might have a way to get it. After all, Yao Yao's position in the Qingqiu clan wasn't low. Moreover, the high priest believed that the fatty and I were the god's envoys sent by the Fox King. If I used this identity to ask for the monster core, it shouldn't be a big problem. Seeing that I didn't answer, Master Guan opened his mouth again. "The monster core is formed from the monster's life essence. The monster's entire cultivation is contained in the monster core. It contains an enormous amount of energy. It's extremely beneficial for treating my poor disciple's injury. However, it's very difficult to condense the monster core. Generally speaking, only monsters with the cultivation of Yang God's celestial master would have a monster core." After hearing his words, I was startled. I didn't expect that the monster core would have such an effect. Moreover, it seemed to be very precious. Previously, I had been to the Qingqiu country and understood the strength of the fox demons. Although their general strength wasn't strong, there should be 2 Yang God's celestial masters. One was the Qingqiu clan's matriarch. Previously, when she attacked me, I sensed that her strength wasn't ordinary. However, I didn't have the time to check her specific cultivation before she was sucked into the monster refining gourd by the fatty. However, I speculated that she should be at least at the Yang God's celestial master realm. The other one was the black-clothed high priest. The matriarch of the Qingqiu clan was also very respectful towards him. A person with such a status in the monster race shouldn't be weak. Perhaps he was also a Yang God's celestial master. However, it would be somewhat difficult to get the monster core from them. Even if I used my identity as a god's envoy to ask for it, they wouldn't easily give it to me. After all, it was related to their lifetime cultivation. However, the Qingqiu clan had been developing for several thousand years. Perhaps they had kept the monster cores of the Yang God's celestial masters. At that time, I could ask Yao Yao to help me. It wouldn't be impossible to get the monster core. Having made up my mind, I immediately agreed. Moreover, I was largely responsible for what had happened to the fatty. If I could help him get through this, I would feel better. Seeing that I had agreed, Master Guan said a few courteous words to me and asked me to wait for a moment. Then, he ordered his disciples to prepare breakfast. After he left, I asked the sacrificial evil spirit to see what he thought about this matter. In the ancient war, the sacrificial evil spirit and the monster race fought together. He was also a general under the command of the monster emperor, so it was easy to imagine his friendship with the monster race. Since we were going to the Qingqiu region to look for the monster core, we had to listen to his opinion. The sacrificial evil spirit seemed to understand what I meant. After listening to me, he pondered for a moment and said, "As long as it doesn't harm his life, it doesn't matter." Having his support gave me some confidence. At that moment, Master Guan called the fatty over. He said that he would take us to have breakfast. The Tiani monastery had a specific place to have breakfast. It was 5 to 6 minutes away from the main hall. On the way, the fatty asked me what I had discussed with his master. From his brows, I sensed a trace of curiosity. I was afraid that he realized that the discussion between his master and me was related to him. Although he had already sensed it, I didn't intend to tell him about it. I couldn't guarantee that we would be able to get the monster core back from the Qingqiu country. Even if we got the monster core back, Master Guan wouldn't be able to cure him. Moreover, he was gifted and had received Master Guan's teachings. If he was careless and lost his cultivation, the pain he would suffer wouldn't be any less than what I had experienced when my cultivation was crippled. As such, it would be better for me to keep my mouth shut than to make him feel happy. After breakfast, we bid farewell to Master Guan and planned to leave for the Qingqiu country. Master Guan knew what I was thinking, so he didn't ask us to stay. However, the fatty wasn't happy. It's rare for me to come here, so I should stay on the mountain for a few days. This mountain is full of spiritual energy, which is suitable for cultivating. I knew that the fatty had good intentions, but Master Guan had told me that the fatty's injuries couldn't be treated for too long. Otherwise, something unexpected would happen. I had to reject the fatty's request. He didn't try to persuade me to stay as he saw me off the mountain. After leaving the Yellow Crown Mountain, the sacrificial evil spirit and I went to the Shui County. When we arrived, we hurried to the Quanlin town. It was late at night and we were tired after a long day of traveling. We planned to go to the Qingqiu country the next morning. At night, we stayed at a hotel in the town. I seized the chance to tell the evil spirit about the situation in the Qingqiu country. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.